Chapter 1697. In the empty realm, Chu Mu's condition was unprecedentedly good. He could clearly sense everything. The bronze sinner's attack trajectories, movement trajectories, energy transfer routes, and other aspects were all under Chu Mu's control. The moment the bronze sinner was in danger, its heart would contract and expand instantly. It was as if there was a loud rumbling of a drum. An incomparably violent energy would rush out from the bronze sinner's heart as it contracted and expanded. That violent energy was like the magma of a volcano that had been dormant for thousands of years and had accumulated to its limit. It rushed out in an instant, destroying everything in its path. It flowed through the bronze sinner's body's energy channels and rushed to its arm. Then, using a special method, it spun, charged, contracted, and exploded. It mixed with the sinner's physical strength to produce an even more powerful energy. Chu Mu forced the bronze rank sinner time and time again, causing it to fall into danger. He forced it to unleash its berserk strength to deepen his observation. After a few times, Chu Mu was finally certain that he had seen through the bronze sinner's energy unification technique. As for learning it, it was not something that could be learned in a short period of time. "Your value has been realized," Chu Mu said softly. He immediately drew his sword. This time, he wasn't forcing the sinner, he was really going to kill it. The bronze sinner couldn't dodge the sword, nor could it unleash its strength to counterattack. Chu Mu's sword pierced through its chest. With his brilliant sword techniques, the edge of the blade vibrated at a high frequency, causing the sword to become even sharper. It cut open the bronze sinner's chest and pulled out its heart in an instant. From piercing the sinner's chest to digging out its heart, it didn't cause any damage. The entire process was completed in less than a breath's time. With a flick of the sword, the heart fell into Chu Mu's hand. The bronze sinner, who had lost its heart, lost its source of energy and life. Its tyrannical body instantly became soft as it fell to the ground, dead. The bronze heart was about the same size as the black iron heart, but it was bronze in color. It was warm and still beating, displaying a powerful vitality. However, Chu Mu felt that the bronze heart in his hand didn't seem to contain as much violent energy as he had imagined. "Seems like it was used up before," Chu Mu thought to himself. Just now, in order to observe the bronze sinner's energy fusion technique more clearly, Chu Mu had forced it time and time again, forcing it to stimulate the power of its heart and perform the energy fusion technique. Because of this, a portion of the bronze sinner's heart had been consumed. As such, the value of this bronze heart was naturally not as high as it had been at its peak. However, this was not important. What was important was that Chu Mu had already learned the bronze sinner's technique of using his strength. Furthermore, he had also observed the technique of combining his strength. Of course, observing it was one thing, understanding it was another, and learning and mastering it was another. The difficulty kept increasing. The difference in body structure, the difference in the nature of power, and so on determined that even if Chu Mu understood it, he would not be able to learn it immediately. He would have to spend time and energy researching, simulating, and experimenting. In the end, he would have to modify it to suit his own body in order to succeed. "I wonder how the other bronze sinners are like?" A thought popped up in his mind. After all, different black iron sinners would more or less have different techniques of using their strength. There would also be some differences in their combat abilities. Would it be the same for different bronze sinners? In the realm of silence, Chu Mu quickly locked onto another bronze sinner that had broken through the defensive line and was not surrounded by patrolling Ironwing army soldiers. The skin color of this bronze sinner was slightly turbid, indicating that its strength was not as strong as the one that Chu Mu had just killed. He was calm and unhurried. His sword was constantly pressuring his opponent. Sinners had a very high perception of danger. The stronger the sinner, the more obvious their perception would be. They also possessed extraordinary combat instincts and would instinctively avoid danger. When they could not avoid it, they would do their best to counterattack. It was a fighting style that was completely exchanging injuries for lives. Under such immense pressure, this bronze sinner naturally displayed its strength to the extreme. Chu Mu easily observed its technique of using its strength. Subsequently, it was also forced to use the energy fusion technique. After using it once, Chu Mu could clearly see through it. He did not give the sinner a second chance to use it. He finished it off with a single sword strike, picking out its heart and killing it. He continued to search, pressuring it again, and then killing it to obtain its heart. He repeated this process over and over again. More and more sinners rushed into the campsite, and there were people constantly joining the battle. Therefore, Chu Mu's performance did not attract much attention. After killing 5 bronze sinners in a row, Chu Mu had grasped the technique of using their strength and the energy fusion technique. He felt that it should be enough. After all, they were mostly similar with only minor differences. After combining them, he could study and modify them himself. Although the realm of silence was very good, other than the first time he comprehended it, it would obviously consume the power of the primordial spirit after using it. It felt like he was burning the power of the primordial spirit as fuel in exchange for the state of the realm of silence. Therefore, when he felt that it was about time, Chu Mu stopped using the realm of silence. The power of the primordial spirit had been consumed by more than 40%, almost 50%. Without entering the realm of silence, Chu Mu still possessed amazing strength. Those below the peak of the 7-star saint level were no match for him at all. After that, Chu Mu did not deliberately look for sinners of any level. As long as a sinner broke through the defensive line and entered the campsite and was relatively close to him, Chu Mu would draw his sword and kill it. If it was a dark iron sinner, he would only use the power of his divine body and the technique of using his strength that he had learned from the bronze sinners. Go surround them. Jing Qi led a team of warriors and patrolled the campsite, looking for sinners who had broken through the defensive line to kill. Jing Qi was a mid-tier 7-star saint, but his strength had reached the level of an ordinary upper-tier 7-star saint. He was very strong. He had a total of 9 elite warriors under him, all of whom had the strength of a 6-star saint. 1 7-star saint, 9 6-star saints, and the 10 of them were good at working together. Even a powerful bronze-level sinner would die under their cooperation. With Jing Qi as the leader, the sinners who broke through the defensive line died under their swords one after another, their hearts dug out. Scram! Jing Qi slashed out with his sword and forced a sword saint to retreat. That sword saint did not belong to the Ironwing army, but was an outsider who had entered the campsite. Facing the aggressive and murderous Jing Qi, the sword saint's expression changed immediately, and he quickly dodged and retreated. As everyone knew, it was best not to have any conflict with the Ironwing army in the Ironwing camp. Once there was a conflict, no matter who was right or wrong, the Ironwing army would know, but they would definitely be in trouble. This was the Ironwing army's base camp. Looking for trouble here was akin to seeking death. Even an 8 or 9-star sword saint would have to take a step back here. After forcing the sword saint to retreat, a smug look flashed across Jing Qi's face. However, he did not pursue because his goal was to kill the sinners. It just so happened that Jing Qi was heading in the direction of Chu Mu. Not long after, Jing Qi saw Chu Mu. Chu Mu was fighting a powerful dark iron sinner. This sinner's skin was grayish-black, and did not seem to have any impurities. Its strength was comparable to an ordinary peak 4-star saint cultivator. Chu Mu did not use his full strength in the battle. He was only trying to familiarize himself with a new technique to use his strength and thoroughly master it. At the same time, he was also honing his sword force's vibration technique. From Jing Qi's point of view, this was Chu Mu's strength. His strength is not bad, and he can be considered a genius. But so what? Jing Qi muttered to himself, and a cold smile flashed across his face. Shortly after, he gave a look to one of his subordinates, and then looked at Chu Mu. Understood. As a subordinate of Jing Qi, he had followed Jing Qi for many years and understood Jing Qi's character. He immediately understood what Jing Qi meant. He looked at Chu Mu and found that he was only a beginner 4-star saint. Although his strength was not bad, it was still far from being a 6-star saint. Poor guy, you can only count yourself unlucky. The warrior sneered secretly. If it was under normal circumstances, Jing Qi would not dare to do this. After all, the reason why others joined the Iron Wing army was to rest in the camp. It was equivalent to paying the sinner's heart to obtain safety here. The Iron Wing army had to ensure their safety. Therefore, they could not be touched. However, at this time, the sinners were attacking the camp. It was very chaotic. Everyone was focused on fighting and saving their lives. They had no time to care about anything else. It was the best time to kill. Even if someone saw it, they could push the blame to the sinners. Without conclusive evidence, there was no way to pursue the matter. Even if they wanted to pursue the matter, there would be no conclusion. After the sinners attacked, the camp would need to be reorganized. Chu Mu, who was in the middle of the battle, naturally felt the other party's approach and the malice on him. It was a kind of murderous intent. Naturally, Chu Mu also caught a glimpse of Jing Qi in the distance. Immediately, Chu Mu understood Jing Qi's plan. However, he did not say anything and did not immediately counterattack. The 6-star saint warrior under Jing Qi rapidly approached Chu Mu. He raised his sword and murderous intent filled the air. The lava-like sword aura flowed on the sword, emitting an astonishingly high temperature. Then, the warrior raised his sword and slashed out fiercely. It looked like he was slashing at the dark iron sinner. However, Chu Mu felt that he was locked on by a scorching murderous intent. The real target of this slash was not the dark iron sinner. It was just a cover. The target was himself. A cold glint flashed in Chu Mu's eyes. Since the other party wanted to kill him, he had to pay the corresponding price. Chapter 1698. Merry Christmas to all my brothers and sisters. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for being too close to Xiao Jun, Jing Qi said to himself as he stared at Chu Mu with a cold smile and a murderous glint in his eyes. He wanted to suppress Xiao Jun in all aspects. It would be best if Xiao Jun couldn't help but take the initiative to attack him. At that time, he would have a reason to attack. Even if he killed Xiao Jun, he would be justified. With his status and background in the Iron Wing army, as long as he was justified, he wouldn't be afraid of Xiao Zhan. To put it simply, Chu Mu was just a tool used by Jing Qi to attack Xiao Jun. At least, that was what Jing Qi thought. Chu Mu could feel an incomparably hot aura emanating from his opponent's sword and locking onto him. The cold, murderous glint intertwined with the hot aura, as if it was being burned by ice and fire. It was very exciting. The speed of the sword increased, and an astonishing whistling sound could be heard as it surged forward. Chu Mu could clearly see the sinister smile and murderous glint on his opponent's face. This sword was going to kill Chu Mu. Just as the lava sword was about to strike Chu Mu knocked back the dark iron sinner. The direction in which he retreated was exactly where the sword was coming from. A futile struggle. The warrior sneered in a low voice. He had no intention of changing his move at all. The sword slashed forward with astonishing power and directly split the dark iron sinner's head in half. The dark iron sinner's body was indeed very strong, but the sword of a 6-star saint was even stronger. Just as the warrior split the dark iron sinner's head in half and was about to continue stabbing forward towards Chu Mu, a cold sword light appeared in front of his eyes. In an instant, it seemed to leap through the void. The sword light was like a white line that had no beginning and no end. There was no way to dodge. The sword cut through the warrior's neck. After the white line drew an arc, it cut open the dark iron sinner's chest and dug out his heart. Not only did he fail to kill Chu Mu, but he was also killed by Chu Mu's sword. The warrior's eyes widened, filled with astonishment and confusion. Why? Wasn't the other party just a 4-star beginner-level saint? How was it possible for him to kill a 6-star mid-level martial saint like himself? As he fell, his spatial ring was naturally obtained by Chu Mu. Kill him! Jing Qi's expression changed greatly in an instant. Rage surged out from his heart as his killing intent erupted like a volcano. He slashed out with his sword, slashing out an astonishingly hot lava sword qi towards Chu Mu. At the same time, he roared loudly. The expressions of the other 8 6-star saint-level warriors under Jing Qi's command also changed drastically in an instant. Immediately, they burst forth with all their speed and rushed towards Chu Mu. Lava flowed on their swords, emitting a scorching hot aura and killing intent. If it was said that before they only held the attitude of watching a good show, then now, killing intent was born from the depths of their hearts. They wanted to kill Chu Mu. This was because Chu Mu had killed their comrade. No matter what the reason was, from the moment Chu Mu killed their comrade, he was their enemy. He was their enemy, the enemy of the Iron Wing army. Chu Mu's footsteps crisscrossed as he avoided the opponent's sword qi and retreated rapidly. With his strength, he could indeed kill all 8 6-star saint-level warriors who were chasing after him. He could also chase after them and kill Jing Qi. However, that would only delay him and delay his departure from the Iron Wing camp. Yes, when the 6-star saint-level warrior wanted to kill him and drew his sword, Chu Mu had already thought of a way out. According to Xiao Jun, the Iron Wing army was very united internally. Killing one of them was equivalent to making an enemy out of the Iron Wing army. Xiao Jun had said this in a proud tone. It was a sense of honor that came from the bottom of his heart. Such an Iron Wing army was undoubtedly very terrifying. They were not to be trifled with. Speaking of which, Chu Mu also did not want to make an enemy out of the Iron Wing army. However, sometimes things did not develop as one wished. There would always be some variables that were difficult to predict and control. Obviously, the variable this time was Jing Qi. He had a conflict with Xiao Jun. However, because of the Iron Wing army, this conflict could not be resolved directly. It was not important to deal with each other again and again. Chu Mu being brought here by Xiao Jun was a good opportunity to strike at Xiao Jun. Now, Chu Mu's thinking ability was very good. He could immediately deduce the basic situation by combining one-sided information and some situations. He did not want to make an enemy out of the Iron Wing army, but it did not mean that he could not make an enemy out of them. If the Iron Wing army did not deliberately find trouble with him or only found trouble without killing him, Chu Mu might be able to pretend that he did not know or avoid it. However, the other party had already shown his killing intent. Moreover, he had drawn his sword and wanted to kill him. Under such circumstances, if Chu Mu still pretended not to know or endured it, he would not be him. Decisive. Kill. Before attacking, Chu Mu had already considered everything. If he killed the opponent, he would definitely become an enemy of the Iron Wing army. The current him, becoming an enemy of the Iron Wing army wasn't a wise decision, and he had no way of fighting back. However, the advantage was that he was alone and had no attachments. He could come and go as he pleased, and he didn't have to worry about being caught. If he used his real strength, it would take him less than 5 breaths to kill 8 6-star sages. However, it would take him 3 breaths or even longer to chase Jing Qi and kill him. That was to say, it would take him at least 8 breaths. For ordinary people, 8 breaths was a short time. However, for sages, 8 breaths were enough for them to react and cross thousands of meters in an instant to encircle Chu Mu. It was also enough for those high-level sages in the Iron Wing army to deal with him. Therefore, he made a prompt decision without any hesitation. He retreated at full speed and headed in the direction where there were the least sinners and soldiers of the Iron Wing army. He was ready to break out of the encirclement and leave the Iron Wing camp. It might not be a good idea to leave the Iron Wing camp at this time, because there might be a lot of sinners outside. However, it would be worse if he stayed. Chu Mu's reaction was very fast. However, the Iron Wing army's reaction was also very fast. Hearing Jing Qi's roar full of killing intent, the other patrolling soldiers of the Iron Wing army, who had killed the sinners, hurriedly surrounded Chu Mu from all directions and charged at him. What was the reason? What was the reason? There was no need to ask. They just had to intercept him and capture him first. Chu Mu was not surprised at all. It was as he had expected. Fortunately, the sinners were attacking the camp. Otherwise, he would have to face more powerful soldiers of the Iron Wing army, and his chances of escaping would be even smaller. At full speed, Chu Mu's speed exceeded that of an ordinary 7-star saint. In the blink of an eye, he left the others behind and quickly headed for the edge of the camp. You killed a soldier of my Iron Wing army and still want to escape. Stay. A thunderous roar reverberated through the air. Immediately after, Chu Mu felt a powerful aura lock onto him from afar. Immediately after, a suction force sucked in his body, causing his speed to instantly drop. This was the attack of an 8-star saint-level sword saint. It hadn't even been 8 breaths of time since Yi Shiwen had killed that warrior. And an 8-star saint-level expert had already attacked. Sure enough, Yi Shiwen's decision was correct. With the eruption of power and the vibration of his muscles, Chu Mu's figure instantly swayed and twisted. Like a slippery loach, he broke away from the suction force of the 8-star sword saint and flew to the edge of the camp. At this moment, the soldiers of the Iron Wing army who were blocking the sinners at the edge of the camp would not spare any energy to deal with Chu Mu, because one less of them meant one more sinner could break through the defensive line and enter the camp. The patrolling team in the campsite consisted of 7-star saints, 8-star saints, and even a 9-star saint. After all, no one could guarantee that silver-level sinners would not break through the defensive line and enter the campsite. The threat level of a silver sinner far exceeded that of a bronze sinner or even a black iron sinner. Fortunately, it was an 8-star saint who had attacked, and a 9-star saint was very far away. Otherwise, Chu Mu would probably have to use his trump card again. There were still 2 chances left for the Sword Sect Spirit Seal. However, one of them was at the peak of the 8-star saint level. For Chu Mu, it wasn't that useful anymore. However, the other one was at the Saint Emperor level. Using it here was really a waste. Stop him. The 8-star Saint expert quickly chased after Chu Mu and roared at the same time. His speed was faster than Chu Mu's. As long as someone intercepted Chu Mu, he would be able to quickly catch up. The 8-star Saints were the leaders in the Iron Wing army. The Iron Wing army was like an army. The lower ranks would definitely obey the orders of the higher rank. There was no need to ask for a reason. They would directly attack and intercept Chu Mu. That 7-star Saint rank low stage team leader, after repelling the opponent's bronze rank sinner, slashed out 3 times with his sword. The 3 sword auras formed a triangular shape and flew towards Chu Mu from 3 different angles. After just 3 slashes, the 7-star Saint beginner captain no longer paid attention to Chu Mu. This was because in his opinion, no matter how powerful a mere 4-star Saint beginner was, it would already be heaven-defying if he could escape from a 6-star Saint. There was no way he could avoid his 3 streaks of sword chi, nor could he resist them. Swaying figures, staggered footsteps, and 3 streaks of sword chi. Chu Mu shuttled through the 3 streaks of sword chi. His speed was not affected at all. Die! The 8-star Saint was enraged. He stabbed out with his longsword. A spark of flame blossomed. It locked onto Chu Mu at an extremely fast speed and shot towards him. Chu Mu felt that he was locked onto again. There was no way he could avoid it. The power of that spark of flame was extremely strong and terrifying. Chu Mu's sharp intuition told him that he might be able to resist it if he used all his strength. However, he would definitely be sent flying. His speed would be affected and his opponent would catch up to him. The consequences would be dire. At the critical moment, just as the spark of flame was about to hit Chu Mu's body, he performed the sword chi shadow. He shifted his body and dodged the attack by a hair's breadth. His sword vibrated on the head of a dark iron sinner. With the help of the vibrations, his speed increased and he instantly jumped over the 10-meter-high wooden wall. Chapter 1699. The 10-meter-high wooden wall, together with the enhancement of the seal, was enough to resist the attack of a mid-level saint. The sinners climbed into the wooden wall from outside. There was a certain risk in crossing the 10-meter-high wooden wall in an instant, which was the possibility of a space crack appearing. Chu-Mu was lucky, so he didn't encounter a space crack and successfully crossed the 10-meter-high black iron wooden wall. In fact, the location of every camp had various considerations. The low probability of a space crack was one of them. Otherwise, if a space crack appeared frequently, the camp would be in an unstable and unsafe state. Falling down from the 10-meter-high black iron wooden wall, Chu-Mu was considered to have left the Iron Wing camp. However, this was not the end. If escaping meant breaking out of the encirclement, this was only half of it. The moment Chu-Mu fell down from the black iron wooden wall, several sinners rushed over. Their sharp claws instantly pierced through the air and pierced toward Chu-Mu's chest, back, and heart. The intelligence of sinners was different from that of humans. However, they were also puzzled as to why this human didn't stay in the camp, but came out. Outside was the world of sinners. However, they wouldn't think about this question. It didn't matter. This was like food delivered to their door. It would be a waste if they didn't eat it. With a sweep of his sword light spread out in a ring and directly repelled the approaching sinners. Chu-Mu quickly stepped forward, raised his sword, and chopped down. He wanted to kill his way out with the sword in his hand. In the camp, he faced the encirclement of the Iron Wing army. Outside the camp, he would be surrounded and attacked by sinners. No matter where he was, it was very dangerous. However, Chu-Mu preferred outside. At least the sinners wouldn't form a tacit understanding. Following Chu-Mu, another figure crossed the 10-meter-high black iron wooden wall. Before landing, he swept the sword in his hand in a circle. The terrifying power directly killed more than a dozen dark iron sinners below. His eyes were full of fierce, killing intent and anger. Through dozens of meters and through the falling gray snow, he locked onto Chu-Mu's back. Like a sharp sword, he wanted to penetrate Chu-Mu's body. He actually chased me out. Chu-Mu was astonished. However, they were unable to catch up to him within the camp. Now that he was outside the camp, Chu-Mu was even less worried. There were still many sinners outside the camp, and the two of them had attracted the attention of the surrounding sinners, causing them to be attacked time and time again. Chu-Mu's goal was to escape, not to kill the sinners. Therefore, he often used his nimble footwork and movement techniques to avoid the sinners' attack. At the same time, he would advance while escaping. Only when he found it difficult to dodge would he use his sword to defend or counterattack. Whether it was dodging, defending, or counterattacking, there was only one goal, and that was to keep himself moving forward at high speed. Contrary to Chu-Mu's actions, the 8-star Saint Level who was chasing after Chu-Mu was filled with rage. His anger almost reached the heavens, and an incomparably tyrannical aura fluctuated around his body. With a sword in his hand, lava surged onto the sword, emitting an astonishingly high temperature. Dark iron-level sinners were just ants. Especially when they were enraged, they would not dodge. They could only use the sword in their hand to continuously kill the sinners and forcefully open up a path forward. The sinners did not seem to understand what fear was. They were constantly being killed, but they were also constantly flying over from all directions. They were like moths flying into a flame. The powerful aura of the 8-star Saint Level powerhouse of the Iron Wing army was like a lighthouse in the dark night. It was very eye-catching, attracting the attention of the powerful sinners. A few bronze-level sinners had originally planned to climb up the wooden wall, but they changed their direction and chased after him. However, bronze-level sinners were still very weak to an 8-star saint. They could not pose any threat at all. However, they could still delay his footsteps to a certain extent. In comparison, the sinners who surrounded and attacked Chu Mu were not as many or as strong. They were all only dark iron-level sinners. It was very difficult for dark iron-level sinners to pressure Chu Mu. In the blink of an eye, Chu Mu was hundreds of meters away from the wooden wall of the camp. There were still dark iron-level sinners surrounding him. Die, die, die. The 8-star sword saint was infuriated. He wanted to hunt down a 4-star saint, but he had let the other party escape from the camp. This made him very angry. Now that he was met with many obstacles, his anger continued to rise. He was about to explode. With a roar, an extremely powerful force erupted in an instant. With a boom, it was as if the magma of a volcano was spewing out. Terrifying magma sword chi raged wildly from the long sword in his hand. Boom, boom, boom. The ground shook. The terrifying magma sword chi was like a huge wave that surged in all directions. In an instant, all the sinners nearby, whether they were dark iron-level sinners or bronze-level sinners, were affected. Their strong bodies could not withstand such an explosion of power at all. Under the impact, they were disintegrated. Under the terrifying sword chi, the area within 100 meters of the 8-star saint level was directly cleared. The gray snow melted and disappeared without a trace. All the sinners were reduced to ashes, leaving only their hearts scattered on the ground as if they had been roasted. The ground was smooth. The sinners, who did not seem to understand what fear was, hesitated at the first moment. They did not rush forward immediately. It was different. The deterrence brought by killing them one by one was completely different from killing hundreds of sinners all at once and reducing them to ashes. After using his ultimate move, the 8-star saint level's anger dissipated by a lot. His speed exploded as he chased after Chu Mu. As he advanced, some of the sinners in front of him actually retreated. At this moment, gray snow fell from the sky again. The gray snow filled the sky and soon covered the area within 100 meters. Without the hindrance of the sinners, the 8-star saint level's speed increased. He rapidly closed the distance between him and Chu Mu. If this continued, it would not be long before Chu Mu was caught up. Chu Mu also felt what happened behind him. The instant of incomparably powerful energy bombardment caused his heart to jump. He felt that even if he was equipped with the heavenly puppet, facing such an attack, the heavenly puppet would most likely be destroyed and he, who was inside, would very likely be wounded as well. His speed was already the fastest. He could not go any faster. Even if he used the Sword God's Descent secret technique, he could not increase his speed. This was because the Sword God's Descent secret technique increased the sharpness of the sword. As he continued to move forward, his thoughts turned rapidly as he considered all kinds of possibilities. At this moment, something unexpected happened. In front of him, a bronze-level sinner was charging straight at him. This was a sinner with pure bronze skin. At the very least, it had the strength of a 7-star saint. Chu Mu could not kill it in an instant. This bronze-level sinner would definitely slow him down and slow him down. As the bronze-level sinner continued to close in, Chu Mu was also prepared. He used the Sword God's Descent secret technique. Although it could not increase his speed, it could strengthen his sharpness, allowing him to kill the sinner in an instant without being slowed down. As he approached, he used the Sword God's Descent. An extremely tyrannical sharpness poured out in an instant. The blazing brilliance spiritual sword became even sharper. Under the terrifying sharpness, Chu Mu passed by the bronze-level sinner. With a single slash, the sinner's tyrannical body was cut in half effortlessly. It was as if he was cutting a piece of cardboard. His speed was not affected at all. He continued to move forward. Under the support of the Sword God's Descent secret technique, Chu Mu did not need to dodge at all. He directly slashed out with his sword and carved out a bloody path. Gradually, Chu Mu realized that the number of sinners did not seem to be as high as before. This was a discovery that was worth being happy about. However, the 8-star saint continued to chase after him. This was a very bad situation. Several streaks of sword chi flew over. With his sharp senses, Chu Mu quickly dodged. The sinners in front of him were torn apart by the sword chi. With a single grab, a powerful suction force locked onto Chu Mu from afar. Once again, Chu Mu's body trembled slightly, and his speed was slightly affected. Although Chu Mu quickly shook off the suction force, the sinner closed the distance between them. Could it be that I have to use the sword sect spiritual seal? Chu Mu thought to himself. At present, other than this trump card, he had no other trump card to deal with the current situation. However, the sinner was only an 8-star saint. Even if he had the chance to use the sword sect spiritual seal, he did not need to use Bai Ling. Just as Chu Mu was about to use the sword sect spiritual seal, he caught a glimpse of silver-white color. This made him temporarily dismiss the idea. A sinner, a silver-level sinner. This was a powerful sinner that could fight with a 9-star saint. Chu Mu was no match for it at all. In an instant, a thought appeared in his mind. Chu Mu changed his direction. He no longer went forward. Instead, he quickly went to the side. Seeing Chu Mu suddenly change his direction, the 8-star sword saint chasing behind him also changed his direction. To a silver-level sinner, the taste of an 8-star saint's heart was definitely countless times more delicious than that of a 4-star saint's heart. The power it contained was also much stronger. After eating it, the benefits it could obtain would also be many times more. Therefore, this silver-level sinner directly gave up on Chu Mu and rushed toward the 8-star saint. Chu Mu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He had made the right bet. As long as this silver-level sinner did not target him and went to deal with the 8-star sword saint chasing after him, then he would be safe. Of course, he hoped that he would not encounter a second silver-level sinner. Damn it! The 8-star saint's expression changed drastically. The silver-level sinner was very powerful. It was not something he could fight against. He glanced at Chu Mu fiercely. Without hesitation, he turned around and rushed toward the camp at full speed. However, the silver-level sinner was much faster than him. It quickly closed in on him. Not long after, the silver-level sinner caught up with him. Even if I die, I'll take you down with me. Without hesitation, this 8-star saint performed a secret technique to increase his strength. He unleashed his most powerful attack and blasted it toward the silver-level sinner. Immediately, he poured all his strength into his dantian and self-detonated. In a situation where he knew that he was no match for the sinner and could not escape, he could only self-detonate. He would die and take the sinner down with him to reduce the pressure on the camp. Chapter 1700. The gray snow that filled the sky gradually became sparse, less and less. In the end, it disappeared without a trace. Above the sky, a mighty blazing sun seemed to leap out from a crack in the void, turning the heat that it had accumulated for a long time into rays of light. Rays of light shot out like sharp swords, covering all directions and sprinkling down from the sky. The blazing light caused the thick gray snow that covered the ground to gradually melt. The blazing light caused the remaining chill in the air to slowly disappear and be replaced by warmth. The gray snow period finally passed after a period of time. The passing of the gray snow period also meant that the sinners went into hiding again. All the camps were safe for the time being. Outside the camps, it was also safe for the time being. At least, the sinners would not come out again until night fell. In the Iron Wing camp, many soldiers of the Iron Wing army were dealing with the aftermath. They dealt with the bodies of the sinners, collected their hearts, repaired the ground of the camp, rebuilt the collapsed houses, and so on. In addition, they had to count the casualties and gains. Every time the sinners attacked the camp, there would be a lot of losses, but at the same time, there would be a lot of gains. Often, the gains would exceed the losses. In this way, more soldiers could be trained to replenish the losses and strengthen the camp. However, it usually took a long time to accumulate. The Iron Wing Hall was the headquarters of the Iron Wing Army and the most important place in the Iron Wing camp. At this time, in the Iron Wing Hall, a tall middle-aged man with a beard like steel needles was sitting in the chief seat. His skin was dark, and his eyes were shining with a fierce light that seemed to be able to penetrate the void and pierce the heaven and earth. Sitting there, he was like an iron tower that could not be shaken by any external force. He was the commander of the Iron Wing Army, the person with the highest power, Jing Taijun. In addition to the commanders of the other 8 armies were also present, sitting on the left and right side. Except for the commander and the commanders, the captains of each army, as long as they were not dead or seriously injured, were all present. Chief Commander, the statistics are complete. During the Sinners' attack on the camp, our army lost 1,380 warriors, 18 captains, 3,532 warriors, and 27 captains. A captain reported the accurate numbers after the statistic. Injuries referred to the more serious injuries that could not be healed in a short period of time. As for light injuries, with the physique of the warriors, they would recover quickly and completely. Therefore, they were not counted. In addition to their losses, they also reported the sinners' hearts and sinner corpses they had obtained. Compared to the sinner's heart, the value of the sinners' corpses was obviously much lower. However, they were still useful, especially their blood, bones, skin, and so on. They could all be used effectively. If the sinners' corpses were to have a certain value, they would either have to be in large quantities, at least in the hundreds, or they would have to be in the bronze rank. It would be best if they were in the silver rank. Thousands of black iron-level sinners had died this time, while hundreds of bronze-level sinners had died. There were even more than a dozen silver-level sinners. The value of their corpses was very, very high. After hearing the report, the Grand Commander nodded slightly. The losses this time were not much different from the previous time. Grand Commander, I have something to report. At this time, Jing Qi walked out. Speak. Jing Taijun glanced at Jing Qi. This time, the sinners attacked the camp, but one person took the opportunity to cause trouble in the camp. He killed a few of our soldiers and indirectly caused the death of an 8-star saint rank, said Jing Yi, immediately putting the blame on Chu Mu as a sinner. Tell me the details. Jing Tiejuan's expression turned cold. This person is not one of our warriors, but someone of unknown origin. His cultivation base is at the early 4th celestial layer, but his strength is above that of a 4-star saint. One of my subordinates, a 6-star saint, was killed by him. Jing Qi's gaze swept over Xiao Jun. He immediately said, the reason this person was able to enter our camp is because someone in our army brought him in. Grand Commander, this person's name is Chu Mu. He is a cultivator who just entered the land of exile from the outside world. His cultivation base is at the 4th celestial layer, but he is a true genius. Xiao Jun sensed that something was wrong. He could not let Jing Qi continue. Otherwise, he would distort the truth. He quickly stood up and admitted, not long ago, I fought with a bronze-level sinner. In the end, I killed the sinner, but I was injured. I could only use 70% of my strength and was chased by Li Mingyi from the snowfall camp. Xiao Jun quickly explained the cause and effect of the matter. Are you saying that a 4-star saint from the outside world killed Li Mingyi, who was a 7-star saint? Jing Taijun looked at Xiao Jun coldly and retorted, yes. Xiao Jun braced himself and answered. He knew it was hard to believe, but he believed what he saw with his own eyes. A hint of a smile flashed across the faces of the commanders. It was a smile that did not seem like a smile. Chief Commander, I think that either Xiao Jun was tricked by someone and brought a person with ill intentions into our camp to cause trouble. Fortunately, they were discovered in time. However, this also led to the death of several of our warriors and an 8-star saint. We suffered a great loss. Or, someone colluded with outsiders. Jing Qi's eyes were cold and sharp. He did not directly say who colluded with an outsider, but everyone knew who he was referring to. I believe in our soldiers. Don't mention it again. Jing Taijun said directly, denying Jing Qi's second guess. He then looked at Xiao Jun. Xiao Jun, it seems that you were tricked. Now I'll give you a chance to make up for your mistakes. Record this person's appearance, aura, and name. Grand Commander. Xiao Jun was shocked. This was the rhythm of a wanted notice. Although they had only met for a short time, Xiao Jun believed in his own eyes. He also believed in his own intuition. He also had a feeling that this was not appropriate. Hence, when he wanted to refute Jing Tiejuan's words, he felt a chill run down his spine. Xiao Jun, why don't you obey the Grand Commander's order? Xiao Zhan hurriedly said. Xiao Jun was his younger brother, and Chu Mu was an outsider. No matter what the truth was, Chu Mu could not be compared to Xiao Jun. It was not wise to anger the Grand Commander. Xiao Jun had no choice but to obey the order and record Chu Mu's name, appearance, and aura. A carefree smile flashed in Jing Qi's eyes. This man dared to kill a soldier of our army and caused the death of an 8-star martial saint. His crime is unforgivable. Issue a bounty. Anyone who captures this man alive will get 20 bronze hearts. Anyone who kills this man will get 10 bronze hearts from our army with his head, Jing Taijun ordered. Xiao Jun's face immediately turned pale. This kind of reward was large-scale. It would spread to almost all the camps in the entire land of exile and even the 5 major cities. Even a 7-star saint would be tempted by 20 bronze hearts. Some 8-star saints would also be tempted. Even if they killed this person and got 10 bronze hearts, it would be enough to attract many people. Also, let the melting snow sword saint know that Li Mingyi was killed by Chu Mu, Jing Taijun said. Not only did the Iron Wing army issue a reward for Chu Mu, but they also wanted to tell the melting snow sword saint. With the melting snow sword saint's protective nature, he would definitely not let this matter go. He would also issue a reward. Xiao Jun could only pray that Chu Mu could escape this disaster. However, he did not know why he felt uneasy. It seemed that the Grand Commander's actions were wrong and would bring disaster to the camp. However, he was only a captain in the Iron Wing army. There were many people who were stronger than him. He did not have any power at all. A mere 4-star saint dared to kill my disciple. In the Snowfall camp, the melting snow sword saint was furious when he heard the news. Master, this person must have a great treasure. Otherwise, he would not have been able to kill junior brother. Another disciple of the melting snow sword saint, who was Li Mingyi's senior brother, said with hatred in his eyes. Even if it's a great treasure, it needs a corresponding amount of power to activate. The melting snow sword saint said, Ming Dao, spread the news immediately. Anyone who captures this person alive will get 20 bronze hearts. Anyone who kills this person will get 10 bronze hearts. When Jing Taijun asked someone to pass the news to the melting snow sword saint, he also sent Chu Mu's name, appearance, breath, and other records. By using one's name, appearance, and aura, one could create a corresponding bounty and spread it out, allowing more people to know about it. This was a method used in the land of exile to hunt down criminals. However, its earliest origins were created by a powerhouse who wanted to search for his loved ones. In the end, its meaning changed. Soon, the news of the reward spread. The first people to know about it were the saints who traveled alone or in small groups in the Iron Wing camp and the Snowfall camp. At least 20 bronze hearts tempted them. It should be known that most of them had only mastered 3rd-level sword power at most. 10 bronze hearts were enough for them to master 4th-level sword power. Their strength would improve further and become more powerful. Now that the gray snow period was over, the outside world was in a relatively safe state. It was the best time to attack and pursue. Immediately, many lone saints or small groups in the Iron Wing camp and the Snowfall camp left the camp and went out to look for Chu Mu. They already knew Chu Mu's appearance and breath. As long as they were within a certain range, they would be able to find him and capture him alive. Yes, capturing him alive would give them twice as many bronze hearts as killing him. Master, I want to avenge junior brother personally, Wang Mingdao said after sending the news. Be careful, the melting snow sword saint glanced at his eldest disciple and said. Master, don't worry. I will definitely kill this person and bring his head back to pay tribute to junior brother, Wang Mingdao said fiercely. Chapter 1701. After the snow passed, the sky cleared up. Chu Mu also escaped from danger and let out a sigh of relief. Under the blazing sun, the snow on the ground quickly melted. If he didn't use any tricks, he would sink into the snow with every step, making it difficult to advance. From Xiao Jun, Chu Mu had already learned that the mysterious onyx great sword was located between the 5 great cities of the land of exile. It could be said that the location of the 5 great cities was closely related to the onyx great sword. However, Chu Mu only knew the approximate location of the 5 great cities. After all, he didn't have a clear map to guide him, so he could only vaguely choose a direction to advance Indiana. Yes, Chu Mu's goal this time was the onyx great sword. Chu Mu was filled with interest towards the onyx great sword that could be sacrificed and give back power, allowing one to control sword energy. Perhaps observing it from a close distance would be of help to him. Moreover, his goal in entering the land of exile was to increase his strength as much as possible. In a situation where he didn't have a clear goal, heading towards the onyx great sword was also a good choice. The blazing sun hung high in the sky. The environment of the land of exile was harsh. This blazing sun was even more vicious than the sun in the deep blue world. Even as a saint-level cultivator, he still felt a trace of heat under this blazing sun. If it were a nirvana-level cultivator, they would probably find it unbearable and would have to circulate their cultivation method to resist. His footsteps left no trace as he walked on the snow. He advanced rapidly, as light as a feather, as if he was weightless. Chu Mu expected that the Iron Wing camp would do something, but he wasn't sure how they would react. After a period of time, Chu Mu saw 3 people rapidly flying over from the side. Their speed was extremely fast, leaving behind 3 afterimages as they flitted across the gray snow. Immediately, the eyes of the 3 people lit up. They had already confirmed that this lone traveler was the person who both the Iron Wing camp and the Snowfall camp had a bounty on, Chu Mu. It's you. 20 bronze hearts in hand. The 3 of them were all 5-star martial saints. They usually worked together, and when they joined forces, they could even fight against a 6-star martial saint. A mere 4-star martial saint might have some tricks and luck, but they weren't afraid. However, even so, they wouldn't underestimate their opponent. This was their way of survival. For a moment, Chu Mu also felt the malice coming from the 3 people. So, you are Chu Mu. Surrender yourself. The 3 of them quickly approached, forming an encirclement around Chu Mu. Before that, shouldn't the 3 of you make things clear first? Chu Mu smiled unhurriedly. He guessed that this might have something to do with the Iron Wing camp. But as for the specifics, he still had to inquire further. You're not afraid at all. You have a good temperament. The 3 of them were also quite calm. Well, I'll let you die knowing. The Iron Wing camp and the Snowfall camp have each issued a bounty for capturing you alive. You can get 20 bronze hearts. So, you'd better surrender yourself obediently. Don't resist or struggle or you'll be killed. If you die, you'll only be worth 10 bronze hearts. I see. Thank you for telling me. As a reward, you can leave alive. Chu Mu said in a calm tone, telling the truth. However, the 3 of them were stunned when they heard it. They thought they had heard it wrong. A mere 4-star martial saint in the beginning dared to say such arrogant words. Yes, in their eyes, this was arrogant words. Even a peerless genius would only be able to defeat a mid-level 5-star true saint as a 4-star low-level true saint. It would be extremely difficult to kill a mid-level 5-star true saint. Even the strongest of them would be an eternal saint. They didn't think that they would come across an eternal saint so easily. If that's the case, then die. Chu Mu said indifferently. He didn't even take out his sword. He just used his finger as a sword and slashed the void in front of him. The white sword chi was like a line connecting the sky and the water. It instantly appeared in front of the three of them. There was no beginning and no end. They were shocked to find that they couldn't dodge it. He was just a 4-star martial saint in the beginning. When he slashed with his finger, they felt that they couldn't dodge it. They couldn't dodge or block it. They could only watch as the white sword chi slashed across their necks. It was too fast. It was faster than they could react. With his finger as a sword, Chu Mu killed the three of them instantly. Their primordial spirits naturally couldn't leave. Chu Mu directly captured them and wiped away their consciousness, leaving only their pure primordial spirit. Such pure primordial spirits were good stuff. I can kill without hesitation in the land of exile. Chu Mu thought, the bounties of the Ironwing camp and the Snowfall camp are just right. I can get more primordial spirit. The three of them didn't have much collection in their space rings. It could be described as shabby. Their hearts of the black iron sinners added up to less than 100, and they didn't even have a single bronze heart. However, it was better than nothing. Later on, Chu Mu encountered some more martial saints. They were basically all mid-level martial saints. Most of them were in small groups of 3 to 5. They weren't weak and were good at cooperating. Some of them could even rival a 7-star martial saint in their cooperation. However, they couldn't resist Chu Mu at all. If you want to kill me, I'll kill you. It was very simple. Chu Mu showed no mercy. One after another, small groups died under Chu Mu's sword. No one was spared. After they were killed, their primordial spirits were naturally captured by Chu Mu, and their consciousness was destroyed. In addition to obtaining primordial spirits one after another, Chu Mu's sinners' hearts also increased. However, almost all of them were black iron sinners' hearts. There were less than 10 bronze sinners' hearts. It made sense. Bronze hearts could only be found in bronze sinners. Bronze sinners were powerful and difficult to kill. It was because of this that they were so precious. Good. I didn't expect you to have such strength. It seems like I have no choice but to kill you. After Chu Mu killed another 3 5-star martial saints, a voice sounded and approached rapidly. A strong murderous intent locked onto Chu Mu. This wave of killing intent came from a 7-star Saint Realm expert. By now, more than 100 mid-level Saint Realm experts had died under Chu Mu's sword. However, this was the first time a 7-star martial saint had appeared. Moreover, it was a 7-star martial saint. Other than that 7-star martial saint, there were other people rushing over from further away. Chu Mu had become a hot commodity. You should have more than 10 bronze hearts on you, right? It's not a loss to kill you and get 10 bronze hearts. This 7-star Saint rank high stage felt that he had a high chance of defeating Chu Mu. However, I feel that it's better to capture you first and then steal your spatial ring. I can obtain at least 10 more bronze hearts. By then, I will have gathered enough bronze hearts for 5th rank sword strength. Not a bad idea. It's a pity you don't have that fate. Chu Mu laughed. You'll find out soon enough. While both sides were arguing, they didn't hold back in their attacks. With a sword in hand, the 7-star martial saint activated his grade 4 sword force. His sword moved as fast as lightning, turning into a bolt of lightning that tore through the sky. It was obvious that the 7-star martial saint wanted to destroy Chu Mu in one strike. Just as that powerful sword was about to hit Chu Mu, it suddenly changed from firm to flexible. It exploded in an instant, turning into streaks of lightning that intertwined into a lightning net. The 7-star martial saint tried to capture Chu Mu alive. After all, the value of capturing Chu Mu alive was twice as high as killing him. 10 bronze hearts were very valuable. Even a 7-star martial saint couldn't ignore it. The 7-star martial saint displayed his exquisite sword skills. Chu Mu wasn't afraid at all. The lightning net fell and covered Chu Mu. However, it was just an afterimage. In an instant, Chu Mu's real body had escaped from the lightning net and appeared beside the 7-star martial saint. With the blazing brilliance spiritual sword in hand, he slashed out. Chu Mu couldn't deal with the 7-star martial saint empty-handed. Even if he fought with the spiritual sword, it would take some time. With the spiritual sword in hand, Huang Xiaolong slashed out with his sword. The 7-star martial saints reacted quickly. Spiritual sword. His face suddenly revealed a look of surprise. Every sword saint longed to get a spiritual sword because it would significantly increase the power of their sword skills. However, there were too few spiritual swords and it was very difficult to get one. This 7-star martial saint was only using the heaven-piercing saint sword until now. If he knew that Chu Mu had a second spirit sword as well as an innate spirit sword embryo, who knew how envious he would be? Now, just a blazing brilliance spiritual sword was enough to make him wild with joy. He made up his mind to kill Chu Mu instead of capturing him alive. The value of a spiritual sword was far greater than 20 bronze hearts. If he didn't kill but captured him alive, it was inevitable that the people of the Iron Wing camp or the Snowfall camp would know about the spiritual sword. The experts of the two camps also attached great importance to the spiritual sword. If he got the spiritual sword and hid it, he would spend some time to refine it and make it his own. At that time, his strength would definitely be stronger. He could even challenge a 7-star martial saint at the peak of the 7-star martial saint level as a 7-star martial saint. The moment he confirmed that the sword in Chu Mu's hand was a spiritual sword, many thoughts flashed through the 7-star martial saint's mind. However, it was only a moment, far less than a breath's time. Chu Mu's sword had already reached him. The 7-star Saint Realm expert reacted swiftly and retaliated with a sword strike. It was as though he was fighting with his life on the line. He was a ruthless person. He was ruthless to others and ruthless to himself. The reason why he was able to reach his current level of strength was due to his ruthlessness. He felt that under his ruthlessness, his opponent would definitely not dare to fight with his life. He would definitely change his move. However, what happened next was completely out of his expectation. His opponent didn't show any signs of changing his move. He still slashed at him with his sword. Let's see who will die. The 7-star martial saint gritted his teeth and said fiercely. The power of his sword grew stronger. Chapter 1702. The lightning-like sword light tore through the sky. It was ferocious, violent, unrestrained, and detached from everything. It slashed down and bombarded Chu Mu, who was more ruthless when it came to trading one's life for another. In an instant, Chu Mu's body was directly slashed by the ferocious and violent lightning-like sword light and exploded with a boom. However, this 7-star saint didn't show the slightest bit of complacency. Instead, he was shocked. This was because he didn't feel like he had slashed his target at all. What he had shattered was merely a cloud of air and an afterimage. In an instant, Chu Mu displayed the sword Qi shadow. As he perfected it over and over again, the sword Qi shadow became more and more mysterious. The transformation between illusion and reality was mysterious and unpredictable. His figure turned from real to illusory in an instant and dodged the opponent's attack. However, the sword in his hand didn't turn illusory. It slashed across the opponent's neck and beheaded him. The tip of the sword flicked upwards and instantly cut the opponent's head from bottom to top. A surge of energy rushed towards the opponent's primordial spirit and attacked the opponent's consciousness. His left hand reached out and grabbed the opponent's primordial spirit. Under the infusion of energy, he skillfully crushed the opponent's consciousness and kept the unconscious primordial spirit into his spatial ring. Too ruthless. Too savage. Even a 7-star saint isn't his match. This guy isn't someone we can provoke. Retreat quickly. The mid-level saint-level experts in the distance were all shocked. They couldn't understand how a 4-star saint could have such terrifying strength that he could kill a 7-star saint. They couldn't understand. This was something they couldn't understand at all. However, it didn't hinder their judgment that this person wasn't someone they could provoke. Even a 7-star saint was slashed in half by his sword. If they were in his place, they would also be killed. The 20 bronze hearts were indeed very valuable. Unfortunately, compared to their lives, it was still a far cry. Chu Mu glanced at the person who left at lightning speed, but he did not chase after him. Instead, he took off the 7-star saint rank spatial ring and checked its content. This 7-star saint's collection was quite rich. There were more than 1,000 black iron hearts and 80 bronze hearts. No wonder he said that as long as he could capture Chu Mu's heart, he would have enough bronze hearts to obtain a grade 5 sword force. Come to think of it, after this, the people who dare to come after me again shouldn't be so weak. Chu Mu thought to himself. If he let those mid-level saints leave, they would definitely spread the news. By then, those who were not strong enough would have to think twice. Those who dared to come after him would definitely be strong. Fighting against strong cultivators, a life-and-death battle, was the best way to temper oneself. This was also a way to strengthen oneself. Chu Mu even yearned for a mid-level 8-star martial saint to fight with him. However, if it was someone above the mid-level, the current him was still no match for him. He continued to move forward. As he moved forward, he kept an eye on his surroundings. At the same time, he was also studying the Bronze Sinner's energy unification technique. If he could fully grasp the energy unification technique, the power of his sword would definitely increase by a lot. At that time, his strength would be even stronger. However, this was very difficult. It would require a lot of time and effort. The sun was high in the sky, but Chu Mu's name was spread by those mid-level saints. What? Impossible! How can a 4-star saint kill a 7-star saint rank? There must be a reason. Treasure, it must be an extremely powerful treasure that allows him to kill a 7-star saint rank when he's only a 4-star saint rank. Other than the treasure, there's no other explanation. Yes, other than a treasure, no one believed it. No one believed any other explanation. That was Chu Mu's true strength. The difference between a 4-star saint level beginner and a 7-star saint level advanced was a gap of 3 stars plus 2 small levels. Moreover, it was the gap between a middle saint level advanced 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 saint level. Even the monstrous geniuses of the Eternal Place couldn't do it. After this situation was spread out, it immediately attracted even more people. However, those who were not strong enough naturally did not dare to act rashly. That would cost them their lives. However, those who thought that they were strong enough started to have ideas one after another. A treasure that could allow a 4-star saint rank to kill a 7-star saint rank. Moreover, it didn't seem to be a one-time use treasure. How precious was it? If a 7-star saint obtained it, would he have the strength to fight a 9-star saint rank? If an 8-star saint obtained it, would he have the strength to kill a 9-star saint rank? If a 9-star saint obtained it, would he have the strength to surpass that of a 9-star saint rank? Many people were tempted. Moreover, they were all high-level saint rank experts. In the Iron Wing camp. Call the soldiers back, Zheng Taijun said. In addition to offering a reward, the Iron Wing camp had also sent out a part of their troops to search for Chu Mu. However, they hadn't found him yet and didn't suffer any losses. After hearing that Chu Mu had killed a 7-star saint rank and hundreds of mid-level saints, Zheng Taijun seemed to realize that this wasn't a simple opponent. A mid-level saint rank warrior was just sending himself to death. However, Zheng Taijun was very interested in Chu Mu. No, it should be said that he was very interested in some kind of treasure that Chu Mu might have. If that treasure is real and can be used multiple times, perhaps after I get it, the Iron Wing camp can become stronger and surpass all the other camp. It's even possible to develop into Iron Wing City, Zheng Taijun thought to himself. He was tempted. After giving some instructions, he left the Iron Wing camp and prepared to look for Chu Mu. A part of the Snowfall Camp's 9-star saints, including the Melting Snow Sword Saint, also left the camp. They planned to look for Chu-Mu outside. According to the information they received, they already knew the direction that Chu-Mu was heading. They only needed to stop him midway. Of course, they also had to prevent others from getting ahead of them. They only hoped that the treasure would be useful to them. Even if it wasn't, they could at least leave it for their juniors or disciples. All in all, they had to get the treasure. They had to take Chu-Mu's life. In an instant, Chu-Mu became the center of attention again. This guy was very restless in the deep blue world. I didn't expect him to be so restless in the land of exile. After Gu Luankong heard the news, he smiled bitterly. Yang Zhantian and Lien Hongyun had similar thoughts. In the deep blue world, people were stirred up everywhere. They became the center of attention time and time again. In the end, they had to leave the deep blue world and enter the land of exile. The purpose of entering the land of exile was to increase one's strength faster. No matter what, as long as one's strength could increase quickly without any side effects, it was fine. If he wanted to quickly raise his strength, he would definitely attract some trouble. That was for sure. However, he didn't expect that not long after entering the land of exile, in just a month, Chu-Mu would attract quite a bit of trouble. He had a bounty placed on his head by 2 large camps and gained a reputation for killing, causing high-stage sacred rank experts to move out. In terms of talent, they weren't as good as Chu-Mu. In terms of strength, they weren't as good as Chu-Mu. In terms of ability to cause trouble, they were far inferior. However, even if they knew the news, the 3 of them didn't have any intention of coming out to help. If they really came out, they wouldn't be helping. They would only cause trouble. Although they had more or less gained some benefits after entering the land of exile and their strength had increased, it wasn't much. After all, the time was too short. Right now, they were 1-star martial saints and only had the strength of a 3-star martial saint. It was already difficult for them to move around in the land of exile, not to mention helping Chu-Mu. Moreover, they were very confident in Chu-Mu. In the deep blue world, he had turned danger into safety time and time again. In the land of exile, they believed that Chu-Mu could do the same. In their hearts, there was only one thought. That was to increase their strength as quickly as possible so that Chu-Mu wouldn't fall further behind. You killed my junior. Pay with your life. Wang Daoming pointed his sword at Chu-Mu. His hatred was endless. If you want to kill me, you have to be prepared to be killed. Chu-Mu smiled. He didn't know who the other party was. Kill his junior? Since entering the land of exile, more than 100 martial saints had died under his sword. Which one of them was his junior? However, Chu-Mu wasn't interested in knowing. He only understood one thing. Whoever wanted to kill him had to be prepared to be killed by him. Wang Mingdao directly drew his sword and slashed. In an instant, a chilling aura filled the air. Snowflakes swirled, collided, exploded, and surged, freezing everything. His first move was a powerful sword move. He showed no mercy. It was obvious that Wang Mingdao hated and wanted to kill Chu-Mu. From the way Wang Mingdao drew his sword, Chu-Mu could see the knack and understood the meaning of Wang Mingdao's words. The blaze spiritual sword slashed out. Under the clouds, the cloud-piercing sword was used. Wang Mingdao's strength was at the high level of a 7-star martial saint. However, he was a genius and had the strength of a peak 7-star martial saint. He practiced the sword techniques of the Melting Snow Sword Saint. The inheritance was complete and exquisite. Upon contact, Wang Mingdao immediately realized that Chu-Mu's strength couldn't be judged by his cultivation. When the secret technique was used, the wind whistled past. The temperature plummeted and condensed into snowflakes. The snowflakes covered an area of a few hundred meters. Heavy snow fell. Each snowflake was half the size of a palm. The chilling aura was shocking. The most suitable environment for the melting snow sword technique was where the snow fell. This was because the sword techniques of the melting snow sword saint could absorb the chilling aura of the falling snow to increase their strength. Therefore, the melting snow sword technique was constantly used. In the later stages of the snowfall, the sword techniques would become more powerful. In the end, Wang Mingdao would probably have the strength to fight an 8-star martial saint. However, snow was not something that could be found every day, nor was it something that could be found everywhere. Thus, the snow-melting lineage specialized in sword technique. After many years, they had researched a secret technique that was capable of turning a certain area into a land of snow. Chapter 1703. Heaven and Earth Snowfall. Amidst the coldness of the snowflakes, there was also a blazing killing intent. The snowflakes were upright and filled with shocking killing intent. When combined with the coldness, they froze everything in the surroundings and drove everything in the surroundings. Compared to Li Mingyi's swordsmanship, Wang Daoming's swordsmanship was much better. Chu Mu's eyes lit up. This was a strong opponent. Wang Daoming was an advanced 7-star saint with the strength of a peak 7-star saint. After using the secret technique, the power of his swordsmanship increased again, surpassing the strength of an ordinary peak 7-star saint. One had to know that the standard of an ordinary saint in the land of exile was higher than in the deep blue world. After all, the battles here were more direct and fierce. Without using the secret technique and the dual swords, Wang Mingdao's strength was no weaker than Chu Mu's. It was more meaningful to kill such an opponent. Chu Mu focused and his blood boiled. He tried his best to fight with Wang Mingdao. Within a range of a few hundred meters, snow began to pour down. Wang Mingdao's sword technique's power gradually increased. As it grew stronger, the pressure it gave Chu Mu naturally grew stronger as well. Under this pressure, Chu Mu's potential was gradually stimulated. In terms of swordsmanship, he was far superior to his opponent. The difference was in cultivation. The difference between the early 4th sky of Aeon and the late 7th sky of Aeon was huge. Combined with other aspects, Wang Mingdao's strength wasn't to be underestimated. With a sword in hand, Chu Mu displayed an incomparably exquisite sword technique, causing Wang Mingdao's heart to be endlessly shocked. This made him even more determined to kill Chu Mu. If such a person wasn't killed, he wouldn't be able to feel at ease. The power of the melting snow swordsmanship kept increasing. Although it wasn't fast, it would become stronger as time passed. As long as he had enough time to use the secret technique, the final power of the melting snow swordsmanship would be enough to kill an ordinary 8-star saint. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had enough strength. If his opponent was an 8-star saint, his opponent wouldn't give him so much time to increase the power of the melting snow swordsmanship. But no matter what, the melting snow swordsmanship had a huge advantage in a battle of the same level. Chu Mu had already known the advantage of the melting snow swordsmanship long ago. He didn't break his opponent's melting snow swordsmanship so quickly. Firstly, it was hard to find a suitable opponent. Secondly, he wanted to take a closer look at the subtlety of the melting snow swordsmanship. Wang Mingdao's melting snow swordsmanship was indeed much more exquisite than Li Mingyi's. Under the fierce battle, Chu Mu took out the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew and consumed it with the help of his opponent's pressure. The aura of spiritual items. Wang Mingdao's expression changed. If you have any spiritual items on you, hand them all over. Originally, he only had one goal, which was to kill Chu Mu to avenge his junior brother Li Mingyi. After seeing Chu Mu's spiritual sword, he had another goal, which was to kill Chu Mu and obtain the spiritual sword. Now, he had another goal, which was to obtain the spiritual item. His original goal had already been covered up. It had to be said that in the face of enough benefits, any idea could be changed. Under increasing pressure, the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew was constantly digested and tempered Chu Mu's divine body, causing his divine body to begin to accumulate strength to break through to a higher level. After a while, Chu Mu digested the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew and drank it again. It stimulated Wang Mingdao's eyes to turn red, and he almost went crazy. The more his opponent drank, the less he would gain after killing him. Under the stimulation of the spiritual item, Wang Mingdao's sword was faster and fiercer, and its power seemed to be more powerful. Unfortunately, Chu Mu frowned. The most taboo for sword practitioners is to lose their mind and reason. That will cause the heart of the sword to be covered in dust. The power of the sword seems to increase, but in fact, it will deviate from the right path and lose its essence. At this time, Wang Mingdao, because of the stimulation of the spiritual sword and the spiritual item, had somewhat lost his mind. The power of the sword seemed to increase, but in fact, it had lost its original power and became chaotic. In that case, you'll die, Chu Mu secretly said. He dodged and blocked, looking for an opportunity. The opportunity was fleeting, but Chu Mu seized it in an instant. He blocked and counterattacked. His sword was like flowing light, piercing the clouds and breaking the moon. It was a fatal blow. Wang Mingdao's face was full of astonishment, and his red eyes were full of disbelief. How could it be? The power of his melting snow swordsmanship had been enhanced to an amazing extent, almost reaching the level of an 8-star martial saint. How could it be killed by his opponent with one sword? Until now, he still did not understand why. The reason was that his mind was in a mess. A sword saint's mind could not be in a mess. Wang Mingdao's vital spirit was also collected by Chu Mu, and his space ring naturally became Chu Mu's trophies. As a member of the Snowfall Camp and the first disciple of the Melting Snow Sword Saint, the collection in Wang Mingdao's space ring was quite good, but it all benefited Chu Mu. In the land of exile, the most common and useful thing was undoubtedly the sinner's heart. Therefore, the more sinners' hearts he obtained, the better. Right now, Chu Mu was using the method of using battle to nurture battle. While improving himself, he was also obtaining more sinner heart. In the battle with Wang Mingdao, Chu Mu had also consumed a lot of energy. He quickly took out an elixir, because he knew that he would encounter many people blocking his way forward. This was an 8-star martial saint expert. An 8-star martial saint expert at the beginning of the 8-star martial saint level stood on the ground in front of him with a sword in his hand. It was as if he had been standing there for a long time and had been waiting for a long time. His aura was very sharp, and it cut through the surroundings. Within a radius of several thousand meters, anyone who was not as strong as him would feel pain on their skin if they approached him. At first glance, Chu Mu could tell that this person was not an ordinary 8-star martial saint at the beginning of the 8-star martial saint level. His strength might be close to or even comparable to that of a middle-level 8-star martial saint. For a moment, Chu Mu's blood flowed faster, as if it had been ignited and boiled. This person was here to stop him. Chu Mu knew very well that his fighting spirit was boundless, and it soared into the sky. The sword's soul in his spiritual world was resonating, and the sword will was vast and mighty. Before the fight started, Chu Mu could tell that this person was a strong opponent who was more powerful than Wang Mingdao. A 8-star martial saint at the beginning of the 8-star martial saint level, even if it was just an ordinary 8-star martial saint, Chu Mu was not sure whether he could fight against it. However, he was confident that he could escape from the sword of an 8-star martial saint at the beginning of the 8-star martial saint level. The 8-star martial saint from the Iron Wing Battalion who chased after him that day was an advanced martial saint, not a middle-level one. Under normal circumstances, there was a gap of several times between the advanced martial saint and the middle-level martial saint. Chu Mu could escape from the opponent's attack, partly because of luck, but also because he was strong enough. Otherwise, he would not have been able to escape. Even so, Chu Mu wanted to use this 8-star martial saint at the beginning of the 8-star martial saint level as his whetstone. He believed that the pressure this person brought to him would be many times greater than Wang Mingdao's. By then, He could refine the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew faster and refine his saint body. Holding the blazing brilliance spiritual sword, Chu Mu's footsteps gradually sped up. He seemed to have turned into a shadow, and as if he was blown by the wind, he quickly swept toward the opponent. "Good timing," the 8-star martial saint said softly. The moment he raised his sword, a round of sharp light danced with it. Behind him, a blazing sun seemed to appear, slowly rising into the sky, and gradually becoming blazing and strong. The sword was swung out, and in the swishing sound, the blazing sun behind him suddenly burst into amazing light, which gathered on the sword in an instant, and then slashed out with the sword momentum. Rays of bright red light, upright and blazing at high temperature, were like flowing fire that could penetrate all things, agile and jumping, and contained amazing destructive power that could burn everything. Once the sword was drawn, there was no mercy. He completely regarded Chu Mu as a strong opponent. Moreover, this person had not introduced himself. Obviously, he was the kind of person who would fight with his sword to determine life and death. Such a person was even more amazing in battle. Every stream of fire contained an incomparably shocking power. Any one of them could kill an ordinary 7-star saint. Chu Mu did not have the slightest fear. He had already drunk 1,000 pounds of the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew, just for this moment. 1,000 pounds of the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew was equivalent to 100 pounds of water. For a martial saint cultivator, drinking 100 pounds or even 1,000 pounds of water was nothing at all. It could not make their belly bulge, even a little. Of course, 1,000 pounds of the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew was not comparable to 100 pounds or even 1,000 pounds of water. Water was water, it did not contain any power. However, the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew was a spiritual object. It contained the power of the 5 elements and the world's origin energy. It was incomparably pure and rich. The gap between the two was like the gap between charcoal and diamond. After drinking 1,000 pounds of the 5 elements spirit-cleansing dew, Chu Mu felt that his belly was somewhat bloated. If he drank more, he was afraid that it would affect his battle. Under the huge pressure, Chu Mu used the Qi force fusion technique to resist. After his continuous research, he gradually grasped the surface. Gradually, he was able to combine his physical strength with his origin energy to release a more powerful power. Just researching was not enough. He also needed to use it. Only by using it more could he have a better grasp. Especially the technique of using power, it needed to be experienced in actual combat. A powerful opponent was the best whetstone. What was a powerful opponent? It was an opponent that could bring enough pressure to oneself. Compared in all aspects, Chu Mu was inferior to the opponent. However, in the realm of swordsmanship, Chu Mu was superior to the opponent by a lot. Therefore, at a glance, Chu Mu could see the real situation of the opponent's sword move. Indeed, every stream of fire contained a terrifying power that could kill an ordinary 7-star martial saint. However, the problem was that these streams of fire were not concentrated in one stream. Instead, there were many streams of them. Between each stream of fire there were gaps, and their trajectories were traceable. In an instant, Chu Mu drew his sword and displayed the beheading Dao sword style. The sword light cut through in a strange trajectory and instantly shattered the stream of fire in a line. The rest of the stream of fire flew past Chu Mu's side. Chapter 1704. There was a scorching sun behind him, burning like a big fireball. It released an astonishingly high temperature that roasted the surroundings. It resonated with the scorching sun in the sky. A shocking amount of hot air spread out and rushed in all directions, causing Chu Mu to feel his mouth go dry. Very strong. The strength of this 8-star martial saint was very strong. It brought great pressure to Chu Mu. He grasped the void with his left hand. Under the eternal aura, the eternal spiritual sword appeared. With 2 swords in his hands, Chu Mu's strength multiplied. 2 spiritual swords. The 8-star martial saint's expression changed drastically. His pupils shrank sharply in an instant. The sword he used was only the heaven-reaching holy sword. A 4-star martial saint actually had 2 spiritual swords. The huge gap between them made him very envious, but this person's mind was firm. It was far from Wang Mingdao's. Faced with the temptation of 2 spiritual swords, he did not lose his mind. Because he knew very well that if his mind was not shaken, he would not be deceived and would not deviate from his own way of the sword. As long as he killed his opponent, the 2 spiritual swords would be his. With 2 swords in his hands, Chu Mu's strength multiplied. The pressure on him was obviously reduced. The 8-star martial saint kept attacking. Every sword was like a flowing fire that tore through the sky. It was free, agile, and violent. Its power was endless. In the battle, Chu Mu keenly grasped that this person's swordsmanship was closely related to the big burning fireball behind him. The big fireball resonated with the scorching sun in the sky, forming a unique resonance. This made the power of his swordsmanship even stronger. This swordsmanship was somewhat similar to the melting snow swordsmanship. They could both use the environment to increase their power. But there were also differences. As long as the melting snow swordsmanship was in a snowy environment, its power would gradually increase over time until it reached the limit of what an individual could bear. But the power of this 8-star martial saint's swordsmanship was fixed. But every sword contained an astonishing heat and fierceness like the scorching sun. Its power was incomparably strong and exquisite. As the 8-star sword saint displayed his swordsmanship, the surroundings gradually turned into a place covered in high temperature. It was obviously much hotter than other places 100 meters away. Under the high temperature, Chu Mu's blood, which was boiling because of his fighting spirit, seemed to have been ignited. The shocking heat spread from the inside out. Sweat seeped out, evaporated, and turned into wisps of white that spread out. This high temperature directly affected Chu Mu's blood. Fortunately, his sacred body had reached the pinnacle of level 4. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to withstand such a high temperature. Under the high temperature, the 5 elements spirit cleansing dew in his body was constantly consumed, tempering his saint body and accumulating. The 500 kilograms of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew, under this kind of high temperature and pressure, was quickly consumed, and after a period of time, it was completely consumed. Withstanding the pressure of the other party, with the power of his soul, he took out the jade bottle and once again drank 500 kilograms of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew. Chu Mu's soul power was huge and pure, sometimes it could completely replace his arms. Spiritual object. This 8-star martial saint's mind trembled violently. He didn't expect that this 4-star martial saint not only had 2 spiritual swords, but also spiritual objects. He was simply a treasure. Under the temptation of the 2 spiritual swords and spiritual objects, his mind was shaken. He quickly held on to his heart, and his expression became more and more cold and solemn. The 500 kilograms of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew was consumed again. The 2 swords constantly displayed sword moves to resist. Cloud-piercing sword style. Dao-cutting sword style. 6 paths sword style. The 3 sword styles were alternately displayed. Cloud-piercing sword style and Dao-beheading sword style were purely offensive sword styles. If Chu Mu used them at full strength, they could threaten the opponent. As for 6 Dao sword style, it was purely defensive sword style that could absorb the opponent's attack. However, there was an upper limit to the absorption of the 6 paths sword style. It could barely absorb the attack of an ordinary 8-star martial saint. The power of the opponent's sword was very tyrannical, close to the 8-star martial saint intermediate level. It was impossible to absorb all of it, and the 6 paths sword style vortex would collapse. As soon as the vortex collapsed, Chu Mu immediately dodged and quickly made a counterattack. He was obviously at a disadvantage and was about to be defeated, but he held on. He was very tenacious, which shocked the 8-star martial saint beginner very much. He was also very impressed. Could it be that the opponent didn't rely on the power of the treasure? He couldn't help but have a thought in his mind. Because in this kind of close combat, the change in the opponent's aura could be very clearly felt and captured. Other than the aura of the 2 spiritual swords and the spiritual object, he didn't feel the aura of any other treasure. Unless the treasure was too advanced, far beyond his level, otherwise, it was impossible for him not to feel it. With his strength as an 8-star martial saint, how advanced was the treasure that he couldn't feel the slightest bit of aura? It was hard to imagine, and he had never heard of it. Then another explanation was that the strength of this person was not based on any treasure at all, but he had such strength himself. A 4-star martial saint beginner had the strength to surpass a 7-star martial saint peak and barely fight an 8-star martial saint? This was simply a fantasy, which completely subverted his hundreds of years of cultivation concept. Scorching sun in the sky, destruction of all things. The suspicion in his heart and the realization that the opponent was using the pressure brought by him to refine and absorb those spiritual objects, so that the 8-star martial saint beginner could unleash his ultimate move. He leaped into the air. When he reached a height of 10 meters, the blazing sun behind him instantly expanded several times in size. The light that it emitted was unbelievably intense. Streaks of crimson light beams with traces of golden light shot out in all directions like sharp swords, piercing through the air and tearing it apart. This scorching sun resonated with the huge scorching sun in the sky, and their strength resonated. He raised his sword high with both hands over his head. A beam of light instantly shot down from the sky and hit the raised sword. The sword trembled, and the golden red light spread out and flowed. The scorching sun behind him also moved in an instant and infused into the sword. The sword seemed to carry the weight of a mountain. Slash! With a roar, the 8-star martial saint beginner seemed to have used up all the strength in his body. He held the sword with both hands and slashed it forward. The tyrannical strength was released freely under this sword, like a huge waterfall falling from the sky, shattering everything. Scorching, violent, destructive, unrestrained, nothing could stop it. It burned everything in the world, causing all things to wither and die. The terrifyingly high temperature created a huge golden red sword light. As it surged, it turned into a scorching sun with a diameter of 10 meters, burning fiercely. Everywhere it passed, the air was evaporated into a vacuum. The dry ground seemed to have become even drier, and cracks were everywhere. Before the golden red scorching sun arrived, Chu Mu already felt a scorching heat that made his mouth dry and his body hot, as if he was going to burn. It surged violently toward him. His expression became extremely solemn. The power of this move had exceeded the level of an 8-star martial saint. It was beyond the limit that Chu Mu could bear now. Chu Mu had no doubt about the power of the 10-meter scorching sun. Once he was hit directly, he would be smashed to pieces and burned to ashes by the terrifyingly high temperature. Even his primordial spirit would be burned. Sword God descends. With a low roar, Chu Mu did not hesitate to use a secret method. The sharpness of his body instantly surged, and the power of the 2 swords was greatly enhanced. Sword God descends. Sharpness tenfold. Spiritual sword. Not only did he use Sword God descends, Chu Mu also activated the power of the divine body. The power of the spiritual sword. The power of the spiritual sword further enhanced the sharpness of the 2 swords. Silver divine outfit. Silver white light bloomed on his body. In an instant, he was armed with divine outfit, and his strength increased again. The use of 3 trump cards in a row made Chu Mu's strength increase by dozens of times. If he could barely fight against an 8-star martial saint at the beginner level before using his trump cards, then he could fight against an ordinary 8-star martial saint at the intermediate level after using his trump cards. 6 paths sword style. The 2 swords rotated, and black vortexes appeared one after another. This time there were also 6 black vortexes, but they were not scattered. Instead, they gathered together and became one. The 6-in-1 black vortex suddenly increased in size by several times, and the suction force it produced also increased by 6 times. The surrounding air was sucked into the black vortex, and all of it was sucked into the black vortex, pulling in the blazing sun. When the black vortex came into contact with the scorching sun, it absorbed and devoured it little by little. Then, the black vortex trembled violently. Chumu, who had used his trump cards, combined the 6 vortexes of the 6 paths sword style with a flash of inspiration in his mind, and its power was increased enough to absorb the attack of an ordinary 8-star martial saint at the intermediate level. However, the power of this scorching sun exceeded the level of an 8-star martial saint at the intermediate level. The pressure was incomparably huge, and what it brought was the continuous consumption of the 5 elements spirit cleansing dew. This sword was also the full-strength sword of an 8-star martial saint at the beginner level. He had once used this move to kill an ordinary 8-star martial saint at the intermediate level. The collision between the golden red and the black vortex shook the air, and ripples spread out. With a bang, the black vortex finally collapsed, and the golden-red scorching sun was swallowed by 2/3 of its power, and its power was greatly weakened. Chumu quickly retreated and opened up the distance. He raised his sword and the void seemed to split open, and a white sword chi slashed down. Heaven's Scar sword style. The white sword chi hit the scorching sun and exploded, and the terrifying golden-red energy spread in all directions. In an instant, Chumu took out the 5 elements spirit cleansing dew again and consumed it. In the rumbling explosion, the 8-star martial saint's face changed greatly, and he quickly defended and retreated. Chumu was retreating while defending, but he was directly pushed back hundreds of meters. He felt as if there were countless flames burning in his body. The 5 elements spirit cleansing dew continued to attack his body, consuming, refining, and accumulating until it reached the limit. Trembling, Chumu felt his saint body begin to tremble, and a tyrannical force emerged from the depths of his body. Chapter 1705. Before entering the land of exile, Chumu's divine body had reached the peak of the 4th level. He still needed 50,000 caddies of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew to break through to the 5th level. After entering the land of exile, Chumu had constantly taken 5 elements spirit cleansing dew during the gray snow period. After leaving the Iron Wing camp, he had taken 15,000 caddies of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew. Later, he was chased. Although some opponents were not strong enough, some of them could reach the level of a 7-star martial saint when they joined forces. This brought some pressure to Chumu, who had hidden part of his strength. Many little drops made an ocean, and it also helped him consume more than 5,000 caddies of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew. Finally, it was this 8-star saint rank initial stage expert who gave Chumu the most pressure. What he brought was the rapid consumption of the 5 elemental spirit cleansing dew. Thousands of caddies were consumed, and 50,000 caddies were accumulated. Like a drop of water overflowing from a full pool, Chumu's divine body finally reached the limit of the 4th level under this accumulation of tempering, and exceeded it by a little. That little bit of excess was equivalent to a key that opened the door of a more powerful force. In an instant, a tyrannical and violent force was released from the depths of Chumu's body. It surged out and impacted every part of his body. Under the impact of this new and more powerful force, the scorching heat in his body was defeated and absorbed. His wounds were also healed by this new force. Chumu seemed to hear the roar of the chi and blood in his body. He knew that his divine body had finally broken through from the peak of the 4th level to the early stage of the 5th level. Although it seemed to be an upgrade from the peak of the 4th level to the early stage of the 5th level, it was actually an upgrade of a large realm. It meant that the power of Chu Mu's divine body had increased by many times. The tyrannical force shuttled between the bones and muscles all over his body like a python. Under the silver armor and the long robe, Chu Mu's muscles were constantly undulating. It felt like a long time had passed, but in fact, it had only been a few breaths of time. Chu Mu's saint body had completed a breakthrough, and he had obtained even more power. At this time, the level of his path of divine body cultivation had surpassed the level of his path of yuan power cultivation. Unfortunately, because of the breakthrough with the help of the 5 elements spirit cleansing dew, Chu Mu's eternal stars, pure yang spirit sword, and 4 divine body powers were only at level 4. Moreover, they were only at the early stage of level 4, which was equivalent to his yuan power cultivation. This was something that could not be helped, unless Chu Mu could obtain a similar power. Moreover, he needed to have all 4 types of power balance. The explosion of the scorching sun blasted a hole more than 10 meters wide in the dry and hard ground. The edges of the hole were scorched black. The silver armor was also slightly charred from the terrifying high temperature, but it was not damaged. That low-level 8-star saint didn't suffer any injuries, but he was extremely shocked. That move was a powerful ultimate move that could kill an ordinary mid-level 8-star saint. How could it not do anything to a low-level 4-star saint? Furthermore, he could feel an incomparably powerful aura from his opponent's body. A level 5 divine body was more powerful than a level 4 divine body. However, Chu Mu had just broken through, so he needed to spend some time to fully master this more powerful force. Undoubtedly, fighting was the best and fastest way to master it. Right in front of him was a very suitable opponent. Fight. Sacred Body Spirit Sword's power, Sword God's Descent secret technique, Silver Divine equipment, all of these combined as well as the even stronger Sacred Body's physical strength after breaking through. Chu Mu's strength was indeed a bit stronger than before, even if he hadn't completely grasped it. Taking the initiative to attack, Xiao Chun unleashed a series of attacks with his 2 swords. The sword light was flexible like the water of a great river, surging endlessly. Every single sword strike was infused with the technique of vital force as one, increasing the might of his attacks by several folds. If the pressure was great enough, Chu Mu could enter the state of the sword of interception. However, because he had not fully mastered the technique and used all his strength, he could not use the sword of interception. In other words, if he wanted to use the sword of interception, in addition to being under great pressure, he also needed to have absolute control of his own strength. After using the ultimate move, the low-level 8-star saint had consumed a lot of strength. For a moment, he couldn't use a more powerful sword technique. Chu Mu, on the other hand, was full of strength. Moreover, the breakthrough of the divine body had brought him more power. With the increase in his fighting spirit and the soaring sword essence, Chu Mu's dual sword attacks had suppressed his opponent. Inconceivable. This was an extremely inconceivable matter, but it also meant that Chu Mu's strength had truly grown stronger. The sword light, which was like a long river, suddenly changed. It became violent, like thunder breaking through the sky or a volcano erupting. Then, it changed again. It became extremely fast and sharp, cutting through everything. It was invincible. Under Chu Mu's sword, the exquisite and profound sword technique was performed to its heart's content. It was extremely carefree, flexible, slow, abnormally fast, sharp, berserk, continuous, or endlessly multiplying. Although he didn't want to believe it or admit it, the low-level 8-star saint finally confirmed one thing. That was, this low-level 4-star saint's strength didn't rely on any treasure, but on his own strength. How incredible! Even the 6 great stars who were renowned throughout the land of exile, who were hailed as peerless demonic geniuses that were hard to come by, did not possess such talent and abilities. Could it be that this person was the successor of that person? Until now, he had never heard of that person taking in disciples. However, he had heard that that person's sword technique was very versatile, and he had mastered many sword styles. There seemed to be some connection between that person's sword technique and this person's sword technique. His thoughts changed rapidly, and he was almost hit by Chu Mu's sword. The situation was reversed in an instant. However, he was, after all, a low-level 8-star saint, and his strength was comparable to that of a mid-level 8-star saint. He had a deep foundation and a solid foundation. This wasn't something that Chu Mu could compare with. The drawback of using the ultimate move was being adjusted. Once he finished adjusting, he would be able to counterattack and regain the upper hand. Chu Mu also understood this point. Now, he was only able to gain a slight upper hand with the help of the breakthrough of his divine body and the temporary weakening of his opponent's momentum. If he could completely master the physical strength of a low-level 5 divine body and completely master the technique of combining strength, Chu Mu would truly have the power to fight and even defeat his opponent. If it weren't for you, I reckon it would take a longer time for my peak level 4 divine body to break through to level 5. However, I won't be merciful. Chu Mu thought to himself, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. In the spiritual world, the eyes of his primordial spirit bloomed with an extremely sharp light, like a sharp sword being unsheathed. The 3 soul-splitting wheels circling around his primordial spirit moved in a certain order. Chu Mu's primordial spirit had reached the mid-level level 4, but he didn't have the time to practice the primordial spirit attack secret technique. Therefore, he only had 3 soul-splitting wheels, and only one of them had reached level 4. The other 2 were at the peak of level 3. In an instant, the 3 soul-splitting wheels rushed out of Chu Mu's spiritual world and shot toward his opponent. The 2 peak level 3 soul-splitting wheels were in front, and the low-level level 4 soul-splitting wheel was at the back. In an instant, they entered his opponent's spiritual world and went straight for his primordial spirit. Primordial spirit attack. The low-level 8-star martial saint was shocked. He quickly gathered his thoughts and sank his consciousness into his primordial spirit. He mobilized his spiritual power and controlled his primordial spirit to release the primordial spirit light with all his might. The spiritual power surged like waves and attacked continuously, but it couldn't effectively stop the power of the soul-splitting wheel. It was sliced apart by the spinning power of the soul-splitting wheel and instantly reached his primordial spirit. The 2 peak rank 3 soul-splitting wheels were obstructed. This was because the primordial spirit light emitted by this person was bronze in color. This was the light of a bronze primordial spirit. The peak level 3 soul-splitting wheel was at the black iron level and couldn't break through the bronze primordial spirit light. The 8-star martial saint heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it was a peak level 3 primordial spirit attack secret technique. If it had reached level 4, it would be difficult for his level 4 primordial spirit to withstand it. After all, he didn't practice any primordial spirit defense secret technique. After coming into contact with his opponent's primordial spirit light, Chu Mu knew the level of his opponent's primordial spirit, level 4 advanced, which was 1 level higher than his own. At this moment, the 3rd soul-splitting wheel also cut through the spiritual power's obstruction and reached the primordial spirit light. In an instant, it cut through a part of it. Beginner level 4. The 8-star martial saint was shocked. His primordial spirit was at advanced level 4, which was 2 levels higher than a beginner level 4 primordial spirit. The primordial spirit light could indeed form a defense to a certain extent, but without the corresponding primordial spirit defense secret technique, it would be very difficult to completely resist it. No matter how difficult it was, he had to defend against it. Otherwise, once the primordial spirit light was broken, his primordial spirit would be attacked directly. He knew very well what would happen if his primordial spirit was attacked. He constantly mobilized the primordial spirit power to strengthen the primordial spirit light. Chu Mu also constantly used the primordial spirit power to control the soul-splitting wheel to cut wildly. The primordial spirit's attack and defense were very dangerous. One's perception of the outside world was greatly reduced. If there were any unexpected situations, one would be caught off guard. However, Chumu had to kill this person. Cut, 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 cut. The primordial spirit power was constantly being consumed, but the primordial spirit light was still cut through bit by the soul-splitting wheel. It went straight to the primordial spirit. His primordial spirit could even feel a sense of sharpness, which made him shudder. This kind of threat was more violent than the threat to his body. Die! Chumu growled, the veins on his forehead bulging. The primordial spirit power surged in an instant, activating the beginner level 4 soul-splitting wheel. The power of the soul-splitting wheel was greatly enhanced in an instant. It tore through the primordial spirit light's defense, and in an unstoppable manner, it charged to the front of the opponent's primordial spirit and cut through it. After everything, the consciousness in the opponent's primordial spirit was cut open and destroyed by the soul-splitting wheel in an instant. His eyes dimmed and his vitality died. Chapter 1706. The corpses of the 8-star Saint Expert fell to the ground one by one. His eyes were dim and lifeless. His primordial spirit had been severed and his consciousness had been destroyed. Chumu retrieved the 3 soul-splitting wheels and felt a sense of emptiness in his primordial spirit. This was the result of the excessive consumption of primordial spirit power. It could not be helped. Chumu's primordial spirit was only at the middle level 4 and the most powerful soul-splitting wheel was only at the early level 4 level. The opponent's primordial spirit was at the upper level 4 level and was close to the peak. Under the full consumption of primordial spirit power to activate the light of primordial spirit, it would not be easy for the early level 4 soul-splitting wheel to tear it apart. Without a primordial spirit defense secret technique, the light of primordial spirit was the most direct defense. The light of primordial spirit from a level 4 advanced level primordial spirit had an amazing defensive power. If the opponent's primordial spirit was at the peak of level 4, it would be even more difficult for Chumu to break through his light of primordial spirit defense. Chumu quickly removed the space ring of the opponent. After the severed primordial spirit, Chumu intended to keep it. Unfortunately, the primordial spirit had been destroyed and Chumu could not stop it from dispersing. Chumu also felt that it was a pity that the upper level 4 primordial spirit had been destroyed. However, there was no other way. The primordial spirit had been directly attacked by a primordial spirit attack secret technique. Its consciousness had disappeared and the primordial spirit had been severed into 2 halves. Since no one else was near, Chumu hurriedly took advantage of the time and sat down cross-legged. He took out some pills to recover his sword energy and used Moon hovering above to cultivate his primordial spirit to quickly recover his primordial spirit power. When the primordial spirit power had not recovered to a certain extent, there would always be a sense of emptiness. To a certain extent, it would affect one's 6 senses and affect the performance of one's strength. Fortunately, when Chumu had recovered 80% of his primordial spirit power, he did not encounter any trouble. When he recovered 80%, it was more or less enough. The rest could be recovered on its own. When he got up, the divine wilderness sword energy in his body had decreased by a lot and his physical strength had basically recovered. At this moment, Chumu finally had the time to slowly feel the power of a level 5 sacred body. It was many times more powerful than when he was a level 4 saint body. When he clenched his fist, he could feel a tyrannical power surging endlessly between his bones and muscles. It was extremely tyrannical. It seemed as if there was a thunderous roar. Other than obtaining an even stronger physical strength, the life force contained in every part of his body had also become several times richer. In other words, the current level 5 saint body's self-healing ability was several times that of a level 4 saint body. Some light injuries on the body could be healed instantly. Even if it was a serious injury, as long as it was not life-threatening, it could be healed rapidly in an extremely short period of time. If I have a level 6 saint body, my self-healing ability will probably increase by several times. Chumu thought to himself. His eyes flickered endlessly. If I have a level 7 saint body, I'm afraid I will possess the ability to regenerate broken limbs. The strength of a saint body was extremely useful. Any cultivator would hope for their saint body to become stronger. The stronger, the better. Of course, most of the time, it was just an extravagant hope. Without a saint body's cultivation talent, without a suitable saint body's cultivation technique, without a suitable saint body's cultivation treasure and environment, it would be very difficult to raise the level of a saint body's cultivation. If one only relied on cultivation to raise the level of a saint body's passive cultivation, one's saint body would at most be at level 3 when one's origin energy reached high-level saint realm. It would be impossible to reach level 4. Moreover, the higher the level, the slower and more difficult it would be to raise the level. Thinking about it, having a strong saint body meant having a stronger defensive power. No matter what kind of treasure one used, the last layer of defense would definitely be one's own body. A strong defensive power and a strong strength. Even if a cultivator had not grasped the technique of origin energy unification, this strength could still be combined with one's own origin energy to form an even stronger strength. Thinking about it, 10% of the strength of a level 4 saint body and 10% of the strength of a level 5 saint body, the difference was many times. Moreover, there was also a strong self-healing ability. Once one was injured, one would be able to recover in an extremely short period of time. It would not affect one's strength. In a battle, such an ability was undoubtedly very terrifying. Once the saint body was cultivated to level 7, it would possess the ability to regenerate broken limbs. Fingers that were cut off would be regenerated in an instant. Just like before, arms that were cut off would also be regenerated in a short period of time. Such an ability was undoubtedly very desirable and also very terrifying. However, it was extremely difficult to attain a level 7 sacred body. Even for many cultivators that specialized in the Tao of sacred bodies, it was still very difficult for them to cultivate their sacred bodies to level 7. The amount of resources required for that was simply too great. Chumu didn't even know if he could cultivate his saint body to the 7th rank. After all, to cultivate to level 5, he had almost consumed hundreds of thousands of kilograms of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew. If he wanted to cultivate to level 6, he was afraid that he would need to consume millions of kilograms of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew. From level 6 to level 7, it would be useless no matter how many kilograms of 5 elements spirit cleansing dew he used. He would need to use a spiritual item of a higher level than the 5 elements spirit cleansing dew. However, the 5 elements spirit cleansing dew was already a very high-level spiritual item. He did not know where to find a spiritual item of a higher level. Taking a step back, Chumu's current saint body could not be considered as a level 5. In other words, it was not a complete level 5 because only his physical strength had reached level 5. The 4 saint body powers were still at level 4. This was the difference between an elemental saint body and an ordinary saint body. For example, the initial 8-star saint body that had died under the soul-splitting wheel was only at the initial level 4. After checking it out and feeling the even stronger power in his body, Chumu let out a smile. The strength he possessed right now was even stronger. However, it was still not enough, far from enough. If he wanted to return to the deep blue world, take revenge, and complete the mission, he would need even more strength. No matter what, this was a very good start. He had only been in the land of exile for a little more than a month, but his strength had already increased by a lot. If he continued, there was hope that he would be able to increase his strength to a satisfactory level within 30 years and return to the deep blue world. After inspecting the spatial ring of the initial 8-star saint body, he found that it was indeed worthy of being an 8-star saint body. The collection was even more abundant. There were more than 100 bronze cores and several thousand black iron cores. In addition, there were some other things. However, to Chu-Mu it was nothing. After all, Chu-Mu's wealth was so abundant that many 9-star saints could not compare to it. With his strength fully recovered, Chu-Mu continued to move forward. This was a path that only allowed him to move forward. There was no room for retreat and no room for fear. In order to become stronger, Chu-Mu had to move forward. He knew that there would definitely be more powerful people waiting for him in front. Perhaps he would not be able to fight against them. However, he could not retreat. Unless he left the land of exile and returned to the deep blue world, he would have to go to the dark deity giant sword. That was an opportunity. Chu-Mu had a premonition. Not bad. A mere initial 4-star saint body could advance all the way to my place. No matter what treasure you are relying on, I have to express my admiration, Zheng Taijun said. An incomparably tyrannical sword intent locked onto Chu-Mu. The sword intent was blazing like boiling blood. It was as cold as steel. It was iron-blooded and unyielding. The great commander of the Iron Wing Army, Zheng Taijun. His iron-blooded sword technique had reached a very profound level. Just a thought, just a glance, it even carried the essence of the iron-blooded sword technique. It could affect one's aura. In an instant, Chu-Mu sensed the other party's strength. An advanced 9-star saint body. His attainments in sword techniques were incomparably profound. It was far superior to the initial 8-star saint body from before. Although he did not know this person, Chu-Mu could vaguely guess his identity. His strength was definitely comparable to an ordinary peak 9-star saint body. Under the lock of the iron-blooded sword intent, Chu-Mu did not have the slightest fear. The eternal sword intent contended against it, protecting his body. It was majestic and impenetrable. This was an expert whose strength was countless times greater than Yi Futian's. An expert that Yi Futian could not fight against now. Divine Wilderness Origin Restoration Secret Technique, Sword God Descends Secret Technique, Demon Subduing Vambrace, Silver Divine Equipment. Various thoughts flashed through Chu-Mu's mind. These were all his trump cards. If he used them together, his strength could increase again. At least, it could increase by many times. However, at most, he could only reach the intermediate 8-star saint body. The gap between the intermediate 8-star saint body and the advanced 9-star saint body was too big. Hand over the treasure, and I'll leave you with an intact corpse, Zheng Taijun said. His tone was awe-inspiring and blazing like boiling magma. Hand over the treasure and I'll spare your life. Suddenly, a voice full of coldness appeared. It was as if heavy snow had suddenly descended. Under the blowing of the cold wind, Chu-Mu could not help but tremble. He realized that this was another person who could influence the aura with the essence of sword skills. In terms of sword skills, Chu-Mu had the intermediate sword realm in his heart. He was definitely above these two people. However, sword skills were broad and profound. No one dared to say that they could completely grasp it. In different worlds, the same sword skills would develop into different branches. The land of exile was equivalent to a half-world. The sword skills here were somewhat different from the deep blue world. It seemed to be more powerful. Hua Shui, this is not something that you can participate in. Zheng Taijun looked forward. His eyes emitted an incomparably sharp gaze. It was as if flames were shooting out. His voice carried the bloodlust of an iron horse and a golden spear. Zheng Taijun, this person killed my beloved disciple. Why can't I participate? The newcomer retorted. His voice was getting colder. Heat and coldness collided invisibly and rippled outwards. When it swept past Chu-Mu's body, he felt a mixture of ice and fire. As soon as these two people appeared, they engaged in a verbal battle. Each of them had integrated the essence of their sword skills. Double monthly votes, madly begging. By the way, I recommend a book from Genesis, Universe Array Control. It was written by a friend. Chapter 1707. One of them was Zheng Taijun, the commander of the Iron Wing army from the Iron Wing camp. The other was the elder Snow Sword Saint from the Snowfall camp. It could be said that there was hatred between the two of them and Chu Mu. One of them had killed a soldier in the army, and the other had killed his disciple. They had good reasons to seek revenge on Chu Mu. Unfortunately, their real purpose was not revenge, but the so-called treasure that Chu Mu had that could enhance their strength. Revenge was just a pretense. Benefits could move people's hearts. If they did not move, it was because they did not have enough benefits. The two of them were of a relatively high status among the practitioners in the land of exile. After all, there were 5 cities and dozens of camps, but there were many practitioners. One of them was the elder of the Snowfall camp, and the other had an even higher status. He was the leader of a camp. Chu Mu did not expect that he would attract the attention of the two of them. Zheng Taijun was a middle-aged man with a big beard. His face was full of valiant spirit, and he was surrounded by a kind of bloody spirit that he would not regret even if he died. It was as if he would go to the battlefield to fight with a strong enemy at any time. The Melting Snow Sword Saint was a skinny old man with a gray beard. However, his eyes were dark and narrowed, flashing with a frightening light. The spirit around him seemed to have turned into pieces of snowflakes spiraling around him. This kind of spirit ensured that he could release the strongest power as soon as he drew out his sword. Zheng Taijun and the Melting Snow Sword Saint faced each other on the left and right. At the same time, they each separated a beam of sword intent and locked onto Chu Mu, because Chu Mu was their main target. Chu Mu also found that the two of them had the same cultivation. They were both at the high level of the 9-star Saint realm. However, in terms of strength, Zheng Taijun was probably more powerful. But if it was a life-and-death battle, it would take some time. In the end, even if Zheng Taijun won, he would not come out unscathed. The two of them would not fight easily, but they would not back down either. Zheng Taijun, you only killed a few warriors. But I only killed 2 of my apprentices, the Melting Snow Sword Saint said. What he meant was that Zheng Taijun had a lot of warriors, so it was not a big deal that a few of them were killed. If he knew that his 2 disciples were killed by Chu Mu, he probably would not be so calm. Every soldier is a member of my army. They are all my brothers. I, Zheng Taijun, can't kill any of them, Zheng Taijun said resolutely. If the soldiers of the Iron Wing army were to hear this, they would probably shed tears of gratitude and do their best. Commander Zheng, once we fight, this kid will most likely seize the opportunity to escape. The Melting Snow Sword Saint narrowed his eyes and swept his gaze over Chu Mu's face. He spoke darkly and his aura became even colder. From what I see, why don't we cripple this child first, and then we can fight to see who is better. All right. Zheng Taijun agreed without hesitation, causing Chu Mu to feel a chill in his heart. He was not a match for just one of them. He would definitely be crushed. Now he was facing 2 of them. Being crippled was not an outcome that Chu Mu was willing to accept. Looks like I can only take the risk or use the sword sect spiritual seal, Chu Mu thought. His body trembled slightly. It was not out of fear, but a kind of excitement that came from the depths of his bones. It was the kind of excitement that would only appear when facing a strong crisis. Only such a person would become stronger when facing a strong opponent and continue to advance. However, before taking the risk or using the sword sect spiritual seal, Chu Mu still planned to fight for an opportunity for himself. Gentlemen, I don't have any treasures that can increase my strength, Chu Mu said. Oh. Zheng Taijun and Melting Snow Sword Saint both looked at Chu Mu. They were extremely shocked. Under the lock of their sword intents, this 4-star initial stage saint rank was still able to speak. Do you mean to say that your strength that is comparable to a 7-star saint is completely your own strength and not relying on any treasures? The Melting Snow Sword Saint said with a faint smile. This kind of expression appeared on his skinny face, and it immediately gave people a very sinister feeling. "That's the truth," Chu Mu said very honestly. Unfortunately, even though he was speaking the truth, no one would believe him. Without a true understanding, who would believe that a 4-star beginner saint had the strength of a 7-star saint? It was simply nonsense. "No matter which it is, you only have 2 paths." Jing Taijun stared at Chu Mu with murderous eyes. "First, you can be crippled by us and be distributed in the end. Second, you can fight with us. If you win, you can naturally leave. Why don't you retreat and let me leave? In the future, I won't find trouble with you," Chu Mu said. It was impossible for him to deal with a 9-star saint with his current strength, but it was definitely possible in the future. If these 2 people really forced him, Chu Mu would have to take the risk or use the sword sect spiritual seal, no matter how wasteful it was. In this way, these 2 people would definitely be regarded as enemies by Chu Mu in the future, and he would definitely take revenge. Although he was speaking the truth, Zheng Taijun and the Melting Snow Sword Saint found it very laughable. "Looks like we can only cripple you first to make you obedient." The Melting Snow Sword Saint laughed strangely. He did not give Chu Mu any chance to speak, and directly attacked. He used his fingers like a sword and slashed out. As snowflakes danced in the air, a gray-white sword light with shocking coldness tore through the air and swept through Chu Mu's body. In an instant, he felt as if he was in a world of ice and snow. The coldness was bone-chilling, and the coldness seemed to come from within his body. This sword was not fatal. Chu Mu could see that the Melting Snow Sword Saint's target was his meridians. He wanted to use the cold sword chi to freeze and destroy his meridians. Once his meridians were destroyed, he would not be able to use his origin power. For a cultivator of the origin power way, it was equivalent to being crippled. It was too fast. Chu Mu activated his primordial spirit and raised his 6 senses to the maximum. He used the sword chi shadow and dodged the Melting Snow Sword Saint's attack at the critical moment. However, he was still affected. Traces of coldness seeped into his body like maggots and entered his meridians. Chu Mu quickly mobilized the Divine Wilderness Sword Essence to attack the traces of coldness. However, the Divine Wilderness Sword Essence was quickly defeated. Although Chu Mu cultivated a divine-level cultivation technique and the Divine Wilderness Sword Essence was very powerful, his cultivation level was too low. The difference between the 4th sky of the Aeon and the 9th sky of the Aeon was countless times. Furthermore, the Melting Snow Sword Saint's cultivation technique was not ordinary. In addition to the other powers in his body, the coldness formed by the combination was extremely powerful. It was not something that the Divine Wilderness Sword Essence could contend against. He increased the output of the Divine Wilderness Sword Essence and used quantity to fight against the coldness. The Divine Wilderness Sword Essence was quickly depleted. "He actually dodged my attack." The Melting Snow Sword Saint was in disbelief. Even if he did not use his full strength, the sword attack just now was very mysterious. Jing Taijun was also very surprised. A 4-star martial saint was actually able to dodge the attack of a 9-star martial saint. He was very clear about the power of the Melting Snow Sword Saint's attack. However, the 2 of them could also see that Chu Mu was in a difficult situation. He had dodged the Melting Snow Sword Saint's attack, but had fallen into a difficult situation. There was no way for him to dodge the second attack. The Melting Snow Sword Saint laughed sinisterly and attacked again. He slashed out with his sword finger and an even thicker grayish-white sword chi instantly shot out. It swept across the sky and shot towards Chu Mu. The power of this attack was even stronger. Once it hit, Chu Mu would definitely not be able to escape. His meridians would immediately be sealed in ice. Even his martial saint body would be sealed in ice, and he would become a cripple. Chu Mu's Divine Wilderness Sword Essence was resisting the coldness in his body. Seeing the second grayish-white sword chi shoot towards him, he gritted his teeth and planned to use the sword sect spiritual seal. The sword sect spiritual seal only had two chances left. One was to summon a peak 8-star martial saint, and the other was to summon Bai Ling. Based on the current situation, a peak 8-star martial saint was completely useless. No matter how strong he would not be a match for the two of them. Then, he could only summon Bai Ling. Chu Mu guessed that Bai Ling was a Saint King level existence. Using a Saint King level existence to deal with two 9-star martial saints was hilarious. It felt like using a missile to kill Ant. However, Chu Mu had no choice but to use it. Under such circumstances, he could not take the risk even if he wanted to. Although the chance to summon a Saint King was very precious, it was still more precious than his own life. Just as Chu Mu planned to use the sword sect spiritual seal to summon Bai Ling, the grayish-white sword chi that shot over suddenly seemed to be hit by an invisible force. It instantly collapsed and dissipated. The melting snow sword saint and Jing Taijun were shocked. Chu Mu also sensed that something unexpected seemed to have happened and stopped summoning Bai Ling. "Who is it?" the melting snow sword saint said sternly. His eyes shone with an extremely sharp light. He swept his gaze across, and it was like a sharp sword piercing through the void. Jing Taijun did not say anything, but his aura instantly soared. His iron-blooded aura became even more intense. Chu Mu had finally defeated all the coldness that had invaded his body. The divine wilderness sword essence was also mostly used up. He was waiting. If there was a chance of survival, he would definitely grab hold of it immediately. Faced with the melting snow sword saint's question and Zheng Tiejuan's soaring aura, no one answered. Soon after, Zheng Taijun suddenly drew his sword. A scarlet sword light that was like lava surged and slashed towards Chu Mu. The moment he drew his sword, Chu Mu felt a shocking heat invade his body. It was as if it was going to burn all his internal organs. However, before this lava sword light could hit Chu Mu, it seemed to be hit by a force and instantly dissipated. This time, Jing Taijun and the melting snow sword saint were even more certain that someone was secretly attacking. Just who was it? Soon after, Chu Mu discovered that Jing Taijun and the melting snow sword saint's faces twitched slightly. Fear surged into their eyes. They glanced at Chu Mu unwillingly before actually turning around and leaving quickly. Even an idiot could tell that something was wrong. Chu Mu was not an idiot. On the contrary, he was very smart. As a result, he knew that someone had definitely secretly attacked. Furthermore, it was extremely likely that Jing Taijun and the melting snow sword saint already knew the identity of the person who had secretly attacked. They were extremely fearful, which was why they had voluntarily left. Chapter 1708. Senior, please come out and meet me. Chu Mu looked around, performed a sword salute, and said in a clear voice. The surroundings were silent, and no one responded to Chu Mu. Chu Mu knew that there must have been an expert secretly helping to defeat the melting snow sword saint and Zheng Tiejuan's attack. Furthermore, the expert had used sound transmissions to scare the two of them away. In that case, what did this expert mean? Chu Mu was sure that he did not know anyone in the land of exile, so he did not have any backing. What was the purpose of someone helping him in such a situation? There was no such thing as love or hatred for no reason. There must be a reason for it to happen. However, Chu Mu did not have any understanding of the other party. After some speculation, he did not know what the other party meant. However, there was one thing that he was sure of. Since the other party had secretly helped him, there must be a purpose. In the future, he would meet and know the reason. He took out an elixir and consumed it to recover his divine wilderness sword essence. When he had recovered to 100%, Chu Mu stood up. If he continued to move forward, he might encounter more powerful opponents. 8-star or even 9-star saint experts were beyond his strength and were existences that he could not fight against. If he did not move forward, he had two choices. One was to stay where he was, and it was hard to guarantee that those experts would not come looking for him. Two was to retreat. If he retreated, he would naturally leave the land of exile and return to the deep blue world. As this thought flashed through his mind, Chu Mu took a deep breath. In his spiritual world, the sword's soul shone brightly, and the sword will soared into the sky. In an instant, all the hesitation, suspicion, and fear were cut off and destroyed, vanishing into nothingness. Move forward! The sword Tao pointed to one's heart, and one was fearless. Only then could one reach the peak and reach the supreme level. Even if there were experts that he could not fight against waiting for him ahead, so what? Could it be that he was afraid to move forward because of his own guesses? Was he scaring himself? Even if it was true, he still had a chance of survival. His heart became more determined, and the two sword souls in his spiritual world clashed. The two sword wills circled in his spiritual world, as if they were being tempered by an invisible force, becoming purer and purer. His sword heart became purer and firmer. He took a step forward and continued forward. After a period of time, Chu Mu was very surprised that he did not encounter anyone blocking his way, but he did not care. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, the environment in the land of exiles was very strange. The weather was divided into different periods. For example, when it snowed, it would be gray snow that would last for a period of time. It could last for 10 days or more than 10 days or even longer. It was called the gray snow period. Another example would be the current blazing sun period, where the sun hung high in the sky and emitted a shocking amount of light and heat. It was like a season, but the length of time it lasted was different. Even if it was the same gray snow period, some would be longer and some would be shorter. During the ardent sun period, the ardent sun would always hang in the sky and shine down. There was no such thing as day or night. During this period of time, the sinners would all go into hiding and would not appear because they did not like such an environment. This period of time was also the safest period of time outside the camps and cities. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 days had passed. During this period, Chu Mu also encountered some people blocking his way, but these people were not very powerful. The strongest was only at the peak of the 6-star martial saint level. There was not a single high-level martial saint. Could it be? Chu Mu guessed that it might have something to do with the expert who had secretly helped him. If that was the case, then it could only mean that the expert's status was very, very high, so high that it was a little scary. That was why he could scare the degenerate sword saint of snow and Jing Taijun, and why no high-level martial saints had blocked his way along the way. In the absence of high-level martial saints, even if mid-level martial saints teamed up, they would be nothing more than food. They were all dead souls under Chu Mu's sword and provided some spoils of war for Chu Mu. One side of the city wall was a huge city wall that was at least 30 meters tall. It stretched for hundreds of miles and was completely gray and black. It looked like a giant steel dragon that was entrenched on the ground, exuding a metallic coldness. This was the city wall of a city. I wonder which city it is? Chu Mu muttered to himself as he looked at the city wall. In the land of exile, there were a total of 5 cities built by cultivators. They occupied 5 different directions, and the onyx god Great Sword was located in the center of the 5 cities. It could also be said that it was the center of the land of exile. The city was a temporary gathering place built by the first batch of cultivators who entered the land of exile. After countless years of development, it finally took shape and became a huge city. It stood tall above the land of exile, overseeing a region. Every city represented a huge force in the land of exile, and that was the ruler of the city. Within each city there were other forces. It was complicated, and their interests were entangled. However, if one wanted to get to the Onyx God Great Sword, they would have to pass through any one of the 5 cities. Of course, they could also take a longer route and go around the city, but that would take several times more time. Chu Mu only had less than 30 years. Even he himself wasn't sure what level his strength would reach in 30 years, so to him, time was very important. The sooner he got to the Onyx God Great Sword, the sooner he could comprehend it. If he did not gain anything, he would have to leave and find other ways to improve his strength. It would be better if he could gain something. With this thought in mind, Chu Mu strode towards the city wall. Under the huge city wall that looked like a giant dragon, there was a 10-meter-tall city gate. The color of the city gate was different from that of the city wall. The city wall was gray, which was the color of black iron. The city gate, on the other hand, was a dull bronze color. In the land of exile, there were not only hard woods like black iron wood and bronze wood, but also stones like black iron stone and bronze stone. The hardness of black iron stone was several times higher than that of black iron wood. It was more difficult to mine, so naturally it was more valuable. In the land of exile, only the 5 cities had the ability to use black iron stone to build city walls. Together with some seals that strengthened the defense, even the claws of a bronze sinner would not be able to destroy it. The 30-meter-tall wall was impossible for black iron sinners to cross, and it was difficult for bronze sinners to do so as well. Only silver sinners could do it easily. When sinners moved out in large numbers, the outside world was usually the most dangerous place. Next was the camp, and the safest place was the 5 cities. A black iron wall was enough to defend against most sinners. Moreover, there were countless high-level saint-level experts in the cities. The 5 cities had endured countless years and countless storms, but they still stood strong. The bronze city gate was naturally made of bronze stone. It was much harder than the city wall. Even if there were no seals, the strong claws of a bronze sinner would not be able to destroy it. The bronze gate was wide open, and a team of fully armed warriors stood on both sides. There were a total of 12 warriors, and each of them had the strength of a 6-star saint. They wore dull bronze armor and had long swords at their waist. The armor of the Iron Wing army was grayish-black. It was made of black iron stone that had been refined and mixed with other materials. Its hardness naturally could not be compared to that of black iron stone, but it still had a rather good defense. The bronze armor of the warriors in front of him was made of bronze stone that had been refined and mixed with other materials. Its hardness could not be compared to that of bronze stone, but it was much better than that of black iron stone. The 12 warriors all looked cold, and their auras were very cold. One look and one could tell that they were warriors who had been through hundreds of battles and were not to be trifled with. If the 12 of them worked together, an ordinary 7-star saint would probably not be a match for them. In addition to the 12 warriors, there was also a middle-aged man who looked like a scholar sitting behind a table. When Chu Mu walked to the city gate, he was stopped, and Chu Mu was asked to show his silver token. Silver token. Chu Mu immediately understood that this city was the city of silver. He recalled that there was a silver-white token in the space ring of the 8-star Saint Beginner, and took it out. To enter and exit the 5 great cities, most people would need a corresponding token. The token of the city of silver was called the silver token. For someone like Chu Mu, who was unfamiliar and did not have a high cultivation, he would naturally be stopped. It could be said that to a certain extent, the 5 great cities only recognized the token and not the person. Remember, you are not allowed to fight in the city. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy. The scholar said coldly. Even though Zhang Xian was surprised that a 4-star Saint primary stage cultivator would possess an eternal silver token, he did not pursue the matter. He simply felt that the other party looked unfamiliar, but upon taking a closer look, he found the other party to be a little familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. But at this time, Chu Mu had already put away the silver token and strode into the city of silver. The scholar did not think much of it. If he knew Chu Mu's identity, he would probably be very surprised. Walking into the city of silver and looking at the wide streets, Chu Mu felt that the Iron Wing camp was like comparing a village to a big city. They were 2 completely different levels of existence. There were no ordinary people walking on the streets of the city of silver. They were all cultivators, and most of them were in the eternal realm. There were very few cultivators below the Eternal Realm. From time to time, there would be warriors in bronze armor patrolling the streets to maintain order. Chumu, an early-stage fourth sky of the Eternal Realm cultivator, was walking on the street. Even if he was a 7-star saint, he would not attract much attention because there were many of them in the city. But at 8-star saints, they would not go out unless there was something important. As for 9-star saints, they would rarely appear in the outside world. Whether it was in the deep blue world or in the land of exile, 9-star saints were considered to be at a very high level. They were peerless experts and would not appear in front of others. Walking on the streets and following the flow of people, Chumu quickly moved forward. Chapter 1709. There were 5 cities in the land of exile: Bloodbath City, Black Demon City, Dragon Slaying City, Silver City, and Green Fiend City. Among the 5 cities, Bloodbath City was the oldest because it was the first city to be built. The other 4 cities were built around the same time. However, the strength of the 5 cities was about the same. It was hard to tell who was better because the rulers of the 5 cities were the 5 kings of the 7 kings. The 7 kings were Bloodbath King, Black Demon King, Dragon Slaying King, Silver King, Green Fiend King, Flowing Light King, and Mysterious King. Among them, Bloodbath King, Black Demon King, Dragon Slaying King, Silver King, and Green Fiend King were the rulers of the 5 cities. They also controlled a huge ancient force. Their strength was about the same, and so was the strength of their forces. Lastly, Flowing Light King and Mysterious King were solitary experts. It was rumored that they didn't control any forces. The 7 kings were the strongest cultivators in the land of exile. They stood at the peak of the land of exile. Their strength had already surpassed the Saint Realm and reached an even higher level. Among the 7 kings, other than Mysterious King, the other 6 kings had their own inheritors, which were their last disciples. To be chosen by the 6 kings as their last disciples, the 6 of them naturally had their own strengths. Their talents were outstanding, and they were powerful. In the land of exile, the legend of the 6 great stars originated from these 6 people. In other words, it was directly related to these 6 people. The reason why the City of Silver was called the City of Silver was because of the color of the City Lord's mansion. It was silver-white, and it was built with silver stone. The silver stone's hardness was shocking. Even silver sinners would find it hard to destroy it. Under the protection of the seal, the silver sinner's full-strength attack wouldn't be damaged at all. It was unknown how much manpower and energy was used to build such a mansion. In the silver mansion, there were countless towers. Each tower was silver-white, and they were all built with silver stone. Among them, there were 2 that were the most special. The 2 towers were like 2 swords, pointing to the sky. One was bigger and taller, while the other was smaller and lower. The lower tower was still 50 meters tall. On the top floor of the 50-meter-tall silver sword tower stood a young man in a silver-white robe. His long hair was as white as snow, and he held a sword in his hand, pointing it forward. Hair like snow, sword like frost. He felt a chill around him. That chill was not the chill of ice and snow, but it was even colder than ice and snow. His eyes flickered like 2 silver-white stars, and his aura spread out in all directions, fluctuating in a strange way. This person was using his own method to cultivate. As if sensing something, the aura surrounding Xiao Chen quickly calmed down and withdrew. His silver-white star-like eyes also returned to their original black color. Xiao Chen flipped his hand and drew out a silver sword flower. The frost-like long sword instantly turned illusory, turning into strands of silver-white light that flowed into his hand and disappeared. His gaze pierced through the sword gauntlet and looked into the distance. Are they finally here? Chu Mu stopped in front of a tall building. If he wanted to go to the Black Deity Gigantic Sword, he could go by himself. However, Chu Mu was not familiar with this place, nor was he familiar with the roads. He did not have any suitable tools, so if he were to go by himself, it would undoubtedly take a lot of time. Furthermore, the black deity gigantic sword was revered by countless people. Countless people carried the hearts of sinners and planned to head to the black deity gigantic sword to offer sacrifices, so as to receive a reward. While the journey was long, there was also the possibility of encountering danger. Humans were intelligent creatures, so under such circumstances, they would naturally make changes. This method, was for the powerful factions to specially set up a corresponding branch, and have specialized cultivators escort them to the black deity gigantic sword. It was fast and relatively safe. Of course, as the price, one had to pay the corresponding hearts of sinners. The building that Chu Mu came to was one of the branches of the Full Moon Inn, one of the few factions in the City of Silver other than the City Lord's residence. It was also a branch that was specially responsible for traveling to and from the black deity gigantic sword. How many people are heading to the black deity gigantic sword? The moment Chu Mu entered, he saw someone registering in front of him. The person raised his head and glanced at Chu Mu. He didn't mind and asked casually. "1," Chu Mu said. "Pay 100 hearts of black iron. Gather at this building in 3 days and set off together. We won't wait for you if you're late," the person in charge of registration quickly said. Although news of Chu Mu's aura, appearance, and name had spread like wildfire in the outside world, and many people in the 5 cities knew about it, not everyone deliberately paid attention to it. It was normal for this person to not recognize Chu Mu. Even if Chu Mu were to walk on the streets, many people wouldn't recognize him. This was because more than 10 days ago, news of Chu Mu had suddenly stopped. In the past 10 days, other matters of all sizes had happened, causing the attention that people paid to Chu Mu to decrease greatly. They also didn't expect that Chu Mu would come to the City of Silver. 100 hearts of black iron sounded like a lot. It was equivalent to 100 black iron sinners. To an ordinary mid-level saint, especially a 4-star saint, hunting 100 black iron sinners was very difficult. Furthermore, this was only the cost. After arriving at the black deity gigantic sword, one still needed to sacrifice the sinner's heart to receive a reward. To the current Chu Mu, 100 hearts of black iron were nothing. He directly took it out and handed it to the other party. The other party was a little surprised that a beginner 4-star saint could take out 100 hearts of black iron. From his expression, he didn't seem to care at all. However, this had nothing to do with him. He just needed to do his job well. "Here, this is your boarding pass. Keep it safe. Gather here in 3 days. If you lose the pass, you have to pay another 100 hearts of black iron and wait for the next shuttle." After the person finished registering, he took out a simple circular token and threw it to Chu Mu. After Chu Mu received it, he didn't care about the other party's bad attitude. It didn't matter. 3 days later, they would gather and set off. In these 3 days, Chu Mu had to find a place to stay. It wasn't difficult to find a place to stay in the camp, not to mention in such a huge city with countless restaurants. As long as one had the sinner's heart, there was no need to worry about not having a place to stay. After leaving the Full Moon Inn branch, Chu Mu continued forward. Not far ahead, there was a restaurant's signboard. It was very large and eye-catching. This was a very famous restaurant in the City of Silver. It was also one of the properties of the Silver Mansion. The name was very simple. It was called the Silver Restaurant. When opening a business, the attitude was naturally amiable. Amiability led to wealth. Bullying and ridicule basically wouldn't appear in such a restaurant. Chu Mu only asked for an ordinary room to stay for 3 days. However, as the top restaurant in the City of Silver, even the most ordinary room wasn't cheap. It actually cost 10 hearts of black iron for a day. One had to know that 10 hearts of black iron was enough for a person to obtain a first-rank sword force from the Black God Greatsword. Thankfully, Chu Mu didn't mind. The hearts of black iron he had now added up to more than 10,000. After paying 30 hearts of black iron, Chu Mu was led to his room by the waiter, intending to rest for a while. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. It was the waiter who brought something in. It was a jade token. Sir, this was sent by someone from the city lord's mansion. It's specifically for you. The waiter said. A waiter wouldn't know anything. Chu Mu took the jade token and the waiter left. After studying the jade token, he didn't discover anything. The moment his soul touched it, the jade token suddenly trembled. A silver-white figure appeared from the jade token and appeared in front of Chu Mu. Sir, are you Chu Mu? The silver-white figure with snow-white hair stood in front of Chu Mu, exuding a chilling aura. His voice also seemed to have a metallic texture. Sir, you are. Chu Mu nodded and asked. My name is Bai Chen. The figure said, Rumor has it that you relied on a powerful treasure to kill a 7-star saint as a 4-star saint. However, I don't feel the aura of a treasure on you. The Silver Sword Star specially sent someone to deliver the jade token to me just to tell me this, Chu Mu said indifferently. When the other party reported his name and combined it with his appearance, Chu Mu knew the other party's identity. There were 7 extremely strong cultivators in the land of the exiles, and they were known as the 7 kings. Below the 7 kings there were naturally many extremely famous cultivators. Apart from them, there were also 6 people whose fame was comparable to the 7 kings. These 6 people were the successors of the 7 kings. The 6 inheritors were all extremely talented. They were known as monstrous geniuses. They were extremely powerful, far surpassing their peers. Many of the older generation weren't their opponents. These 6 people were known as the 6 stars. Among them, Bai Chen was the inheritor of the Silver King. He was known as the Silver Sword Star. In the future, he would inherit the title of Silver King. The 6 stars were all at the 7th sky of the ancient era. However, as monstrous geniuses, their strength was even more terrifying. Ordinary 8-star saints weren't their opponents. The current Chu Mu naturally wasn't their opponent. However, Chu Mu wasn't afraid. I don't care if you rely on a treasure or your own strength. I will only give you 3 years. After 3 years, I will attack. Whether you live or die, it's up to you, Bai Chen said. After he finished speaking, his figure disappeared, and the jade token shattered in an instant. 3 years. Chu Mu looked at the shattered jade tablet and a smile flashed across his face. Bai Chen's words were extremely direct and contained a sliver of fighting intent. Sending a jade tablet this time was equivalent to giving Chu Mu an ultimatum. 3 years seemed like a long time, but it was actually very short. Especially for Eternal Realm cultivators, it was extremely short. Sometimes, one's seclusion would pass without increasing one's strength by much. Bai Chen's words were very clear. If Chu Mu didn't have the strength to fight against him in 3 years, only death would await him. However, was that really the case? Maybe you won't need 3 years to understand that you have made a stupid decision, Chu Mu muttered to himself. Then, he sat down cross-legged and started cultivating. Chapter 17:10. Chu Mu didn't pay much attention to the Silver Sword Star's 3-year invitation. It wasn't that he looked down on the Silver Sword Star, but that he wouldn't change his path because of others. He would walk the path he needed to walk with determination. That was his own Tao, his own sword Tao. He wouldn't just follow what others said. 3 years was actually a very short time. Chu Mu wasn't sure how much he could improve in 3 years. He only knew that he wouldn't waver and would forge ahead courageously. If the outside world knew about the Silver Sword Star's 3-year invitation, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. Unfortunately, the Silver Sword Star wouldn't spread the news, and neither would Chu Mu. Only the 2 of them knew about it. 3 days passed in a very short period of time as Chu Mu quietly cultivated. After leaving the Silver Restaurant, Chu Mu went to the Full Moon Inn's branch again. Other than Chu Mu, there were many other people who had gathered here. Obviously, they were going to head to the Dark God Great Sword under the protection of the Full Moon Inn's cultivators. In the end, about 100 people had gathered. Chu Mu discovered that his cultivation was the lowest among the 100 people. This meant that the lowest cultivation level among the 100 people who wanted to head to the Dark God Greatsword was at the early 4th level of the Aeon Realm. The highest cultivation level was at the peak 6th level of the Aeon Realm. Chu-Mu also felt that these people's saint bodies weren't very strong. The strongest one was only at the 3rd level. Of course, compared to the Deep Blue World, the saint bodies of the cultivators in the land of exile were undoubtedly much stronger. Perhaps it was because of the environment here. Cultivating in this place was several times more effective than cultivating in the Deep Blue World, whether it was cultivating essence force or cultivating the sacred body. If Chu-Mu cultivated slowly in the Deep Blue World, he would need 100 years to reach the 5th heavenly layer. However, if he cultivated in the land of exile, he would only need 30 years. The environment of the land of exile was much worse than the Deep Blue World. This also caused the cultivators who lived here to have naturally stronger physique. The influence of the environment would also allow them to quickly grow stronger. In the Deep Blue World, under normal circumstances, a 7-star sacred rank's sacred body could reach the 3rd rank. In the land of exile, a 6-star sacred rank's sacred body could reach the 3rd rank. Everyone is here. Now, come with us. The flying shuttle is waiting outside the city. A person in charge of the full moon pavilion shouted to Chu-Mu and the others. Everyone had the same goal. Naturally, they wouldn't have any other thoughts. They followed the person in charge of the full moon restaurant and left the full moon restaurant branch. They quickly headed out of the city. As soon as they appeared, the people on the street saw them and immediately understood what they were going to do. Chu-Mu was also in the crowd. He was discovered by someone who was deliberately monitoring him and reported, "He's going to the Black God Greatsword?" Silver Sword Star Bai Chen was puzzled when he heard the news. Could it be that he hasn't grasped sword force? For a moment, Bai Chen's interest waned. He had heard that a 4-star martial saint could kill a 7-star martial saint with the help of some treasure. However, Bai Chen found it hard to believe that there was a treasure that could be so heaven-defying that it could be used again and again. However, if it was said that it was based on one's own strength, it was hard to believe. One had to know that when the 6-star sacred rank was at the 4-star sacred rank, they could only kill a 6-star sacred rank. They had no chance of fighting a 7-star sacred rank. It was because of this that Bai Chen was interested in Chu-Mu. Later on, some things happened that made him even more interested in Chu-Mu. Therefore, he sent people to monitor Chu-Mu in the City of Silver. Once they discovered him, they would immediately report it. Therefore, not long after Chu-Mu entered the City of Silver, Bai Chen's men saw him and immediately reported it. Bai Chen got someone to send a jade token and set a 3-year invitation. And now, this Chu-Mu was heading to the Black God Greatsword. According to what he knew, the Black God Greatsword only had one use, and that was to obtain sword force after a sacrifice. If this person hadn't grasped sword force, wouldn't he be placing too much importance on him? There was another possibility, and that was to grasp a deeper level of sword force. Thinking about it, perhaps the latter was more likely. No matter what, you only have 3 years. After 3 years, as long as you are still in the land of exile, I will find you. Bai Chen thought to himself. 100 people were led by the person in charge of the full moon in branch to the outskirts of the city. A silver-white long oval metal object with a crescent moon symbol was parked outside the city. This was the flying shuttle of the full moon inn. This flying shuttle was more than 100 meters long, but it was only about 10 meters wide. It was about 8 meters tall. Beside the silver-white flying shuttle stood a group of people. This group of people looked very undisciplined. Some of them were yawning repeatedly, some of them had their eyes half closed, looking half asleep. Some of them were leaning against the flying shuttle with their arms crossed, sizing up everyone with interest. There were a total of 30 people in this group. One of them was an 8-star saint, 4 of them were 7-star saints, and the remaining 25 were 6-star saints. Although they looked very undisciplined, Chu Mu could sense the aura on them. It was an aura that was left behind after countless life and death battles. This group of people was very extraordinary. Everyone is here. Get on the flying shuttle and set off immediately. One of them shouted. The door of the flying shuttle opened, and 100 people entered the flying shuttle in an orderly manner. Soon after, the 30 people also entered the flying shuttle. They were the people in charge of escorting the Dark God Great Sword. The space inside the flying shuttle was not small. There were more than 100 seats in total. They were divided into front and back. The front seats were for the escorts of the Full Moon Inn, and the back seats were for the people who were going to the Dark God Great Sword. Chu Mu randomly chose a seat and sat down. His spiritual energy spread out to explore the flying shuttle. The outside of the flying shuttle was silver-white, but the inside was bronze. Obviously, this flying shuttle was not as Chu Mu had imagined. It was completely made of silver stone. The main body of this flying shuttle should be made of bronze stone mixed with other materials. It was coated with a layer of silver stone to increase the defensive power of the flying shuttle. Naturally, it was inevitable that there were seals placed to increase the defensive power of the flying shuttle. It was enough to withstand the attacks of a silver-ranked sinner. The journey to the Dark God Great Sword was very dangerous. Without enough defensive power, there was no way to withstand it. If there were any losses, the reputation of the Full Moon Inn would be ruined. At that time, who would dare to take the flying shuttle of the Full Moon Inn to the Dark God Great Sword? One had to know that the profits were not small. "Brother, you look a little familiar. Have we met somewhere before?" asked the fourth celestial stage of the Aeon realm, sitting next to Chu Mu. If Chu Mu was a woman, this sentence would be equivalent to hitting on him. "Maybe I have a more common face." Chu Mu smiled. "Looking at your appearance, although you can't be considered a peerless handsome man, you are still quite handsome. You have an imposing appearance. You don't have a common face." The youth laughed. He had no other purpose other than to find someone to chat with. After all, in this kind of environment it was impossible to cultivate in peace. "My surname is Tang, and my first name is Gao. I am a disciple of the Steel Sword sect." "Brother, what is your surname?" "Chu," said Chu Mu. The other party didn't mind. After all, he was just looking for someone to chat with to pass the time. He didn't want to make friends. It didn't matter if he didn't know his name. After all, he was just an early fourth celestial stage of the Aeon realm. His cultivation base was lower than his. Since he was taking the Full Moon Inn's flying shuttle to the Dark God Great Sword, he most likely didn't have a great background. If he wanted to make friends, he had to make friends with someone with a great background or outstanding talent. Chu Mu was a man of few words. On the other hand, Tang Gao was a chatterbox. He was practically the one talking. Chu Mu would reply from time to time. The flying shuttle was already activated. A powerful chi flow shot out from the bottom, causing the shuttle to rise slightly. It was about 3 meters above the ground. It was a safe height. After changing direction, the tail of the flying shuttle shot out a dense flame. That flame was enough to burn a low-level saint to ashes in an instant, and heavily injure a mid-level saint. The speed of the flying shuttle increased rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it surpassed the speed of a mid-level saint and reached the speed of a 7-star saint. Because the flying shuttle was flying at a lower altitude, the high speed of the flying shuttle created a powerful chi flow. It was like a sharp giant sword that cut open the ground, leaving a mark. However, the ground was incomparably hard, and the mark was very faint. The fastest speed of the flying shuttle was equivalent to a 7-star saint flying at full speed. This was much faster than Chu Mu and the others rushing. After all, it was best not to fly in the land of the exiles. Because flying meant leaving the ground, one would encounter unpredictable dangers. If one ran on the ground or flew a few meters above the ground, one wouldn't be able to reach their maximum speed. The Full Moon Inn's specialized team had gone back and forth between the City of Silver and the Dark God Great Sword many times. They had already opened up a route. This route could be said to be the safest route for the various factions in the City of Silver to travel to and from the Dark God Great Sword. Brother Chu, you haven't grasped sword force yet, right? How many levels do you plan to raise your sword force this time? Tang Gao found a new topic and asked. I have grasped sword force, Chu Mu said. Oh, it seems that Chu Mu has already grasped level 1 sword force. This time, you plan to raise your sword force to level 2, right? Tang Gao said to himself. Since he was so certain, Chu Mu didn't say anything. Could it be that he had to tell Tang Gao that he had already grasped level 9 sword force? His purpose of going to the Dark God Great Sword wasn't to grasp sword force, but for other reasons. He wanted to take a look at the Dark God Great Sword and see if he could comprehend anything that could help him increase his strength. If not, he could only find another way to pursue greater strength. He only hoped that the Dark God Great Sword wouldn't disappoint him. Chapter 17:11. The land was barren as the sun hung high in the sky. The silver-white 100-meter-long shuttle flew forward at an astonishing speed, 3 meters above the ground. Wherever it passed, the air would be torn apart, emitting a shocking roar. It was like a white waterfall that streaked across the sky. Other than the silver-white shuttle from Plenilun Inn, there were other shuttles that rapidly flew across the 3-meter-high ground. Their target was the center of the 5 great cities, which was also the center of the land of exiles. Other than the City of Silver, there were also many shuttles from the other 4 cities. It would take about a month for a 7-star saint to reach the Black Deity huge sword from the City of Silver at full speed. This was under the assumption that they did not encounter any danger. If they did encounter any danger, the time would be extended. As for how much it would be extended, it was uncertain. Tang Gao was constantly looking for topics to talk about, but Chu Mu responded with one sentence after another. He appeared to be indifferent. In the end, Tang Gao changed his target and started chatting with the people in the front row, ignoring Chu Mu. Chu Mu did not mind. Although he was unable to cultivate in such an environment, it did not prevent him from doing some research. For example, the research on the energy fusion technique. Currently, he was only at the entry level in this aspect. Only by reaching perfection could he perfectly combine his yuan power and physique. 1 + 1 = 2. The others did not have the same ability as Chu Mu. After all, they were just ordinary saint-level cultivators. The truly talented cultivators were often recruited into ancient and powerful factions. Even if they were heading to the Black Deity huge sword, they would not take the shuttles of factions like Plenilun Inn. They had their own shuttles. The shuttles of factions like Plenilun Inn were just more common shuttles. Only those small factions, small families, or commoner cultivators who could not afford shuttles would use them. It was difficult to raise a true dragon in shallow water. This was because the environment was not good enough, and the bloodline was not good enough. Since ancient times, most of the powerhouses that stood above the common people had extraordinary background. Only a very small number of them rose from insignificance. A month's time wasn't long at all. However, Chu Mu wouldn't waste it. He made use of every minute and second to comprehend the energy fusion technique. As long as he could completely grasp it, his strength would definitely increase by a lot, becoming even stronger. This flying shuttle was sealed, and there was no way to see the outside. Since they couldn't cultivate, the cultivators could only chat idly, talk about all sorts of interesting things, or close their eyes to rest. They couldn't do the same thing as Chu Mu. While they were talking, someone suddenly mentioned Chu Mu. Thus, another discussion started. A 4-star martial saint killing a 7-star martial saint. This is impossible. It must be a rumor. I think it's just a rumor. Just like a few decades ago, there was a rumor that someone broke through to the eternal realm from a mortal in a single night. In the end, it was proven to be a prank. However, there's also another saying that the 4-star saint rank initial stage Chu Mu borrowed the power of a treasure to be able to kill a 7-star saint rank. If he used the power of a treasure, It's possible. However, what kind of treasure could allow a 4-star martial saint to kill a 7-star martial saint? That treasure is too high level. It's fake. Everything must be fake. Maybe that Chu Mu deliberately spread the news to become famous. If it's true, he would have been killed long ago. How do you know that he hasn't been killed? The discussion gradually turned into an argument. However, they didn't know that the person they were talking about was sitting near them. Chu Mu didn't feel the slightest bit that he was being talked about. It was as if he didn't hear anything. He continued to comprehend and study the energy fusion technique. This time, the blazing sun period was longer. During the blazing sun period, they wouldn't encounter any sinners. There were 2 types of dangers in the land of exile. One was the sinners and the other was the cultivators. Needless to say, the sinners were dangerous. However, the cultivators were dangerous because of conflicts of interest. Sometimes they would even kill for no reason. Fortunately, cultivators were rational. Unless they were extremely vicious, most of the time, they wouldn't attack others for no reason. The consequences of doing so might be to kill the other party. However, they might provoke a force that they shouldn't provoke, or they might be killed by the other party. The speed of the flying shuttle began to decrease. Everyone in the shuttle could feel that Chu Mu had opened his eyes. Have we arrived? We should have arrived. It's been about a month. That's great. This time, I will definitely master a 2nd or 3rd level sword force. When the time comes, my strength will increase by a lot. Every time one rode the onyx great sword to and from the shuttle, they would have to pay 100 hearts of black iron. Therefore, if it was just to master a 1st level sword force, it wouldn't be worth it. Many people's approach was to accumulate enough hearts of black iron before riding the onyx great sword to master a 1st, 2nd, or even 3rd level sword force. Of course, it wasn't easy to determine which level sword force to master. There would be a time gap, and the length of the gap depended on one's mastery of the sword force. For example, after receiving the feedback from the onyx great sword, one would have to familiarize themselves with the sword force and master it before being able to receive the 2nd feedback. Otherwise, it might cause chaos in the sword force and cause it to collapse. After all, the sword force was the feedback from the onyx great sword. It came from the outside world and wasn't one's own comprehension. However, as long as one familiarized themselves with it, it was no different from comprehending it on their own. Naturally, there wouldn't be any hidden dangers. Some of the people that Chu Mu had encountered back then had only mastered a 1st level sword force. They were forced by the situation. Although the price of mastering sword force was great, after mastering a 1st level sword force, the power of every strike would increase by 2 times. The increase in strength was very obvious, and many people were willing to do so. This was because only with greater strength could one hunt more sinners and obtain more hearts. The flying shuttle finally came to a complete stop. Chu Mu was somewhat excited. He was about to see the onyx great sword. The door of the flying shuttle opened. We're pretty lucky this time. We haven't passed the blazing sun stage. One of the escorts from the lunar pavilion said casually before getting everyone to leave the flying shuttle. Remember, you only have a month. After a month, the flying shuttle will leave this place and return to the City of Silver. If you miss it, you can only stay here and wait for an opportunity. Let's go. I can't wait any longer. Sword force, I'm coming. These people seem to be on steroids. One had to know that in the land of exile, the level of sword force one had mastered was also a standard. Chu Mu walked down from the flying shuttle. The ground under his feet was black, as if it was made of black iron. He lightly stomped on the ground, and it was incomparably hard. A wave of energy rebounded from the ground. There's no need to try. This is the black iron ground. It's natural. Someone beside him said. Chu Mu nodded and did not answer. However, he was rather surprised. He had some understanding of the hardness of black iron. Even an ordinary 3-star saint would find it difficult to destroy it. Such a natural black iron ground was truly astonishing. That must be the onyx great sword. It's indeed huge. It's so majestic. It's hard to imagine. Is this really a sword? Exclamations of amazement sounded one after another. Chu Mu also raised his head and shifted his attention from the black iron ground under his feet to the front. He was immediately alarmed. Right in front of him, a huge black sword was inserted into the ground. A portion of it was exposed and pointed straight at the sky. Black deity, enormous sword. Chu Mu's heart was shaken as he said these words. Visually, there was a distance of about 10,000 meters between Chu Mu and the huge black sword. Logically speaking, the part of the onyx great sword that was exposed to the ground was only a few hundred meters. 10,000 meters didn't seem very big. However, the huge black sword had a vigorous and majestic aura. It was eternal and indestructible. It formed a black phantom that was thousands of meters tall. The phantom that was thousands of meters tall, and the real thing was a visual impact from 10,000 meters away. It was as if it was right in front of them. It was extremely shocking. This was also the reason why Chu Mu was so shocked. The eyesight of a saint was extremely strong. 10,000 meters was nothing to them, especially when it was 10,000 meters without any interference. The huge black sword was clearly in their eyes. Chu Mu's eyesight was much stronger than the average saint. Therefore, he could see every detail of the huge black sword clearly. If that enormous black sword was truly a sword, it would be very difficult to imagine what sort of person would be capable of using it and stabbing it into the ground. The part that is exposed to the ground is about 700 meters long and about 30 meters wide. According to the standard of a normal sword, the length of the onyx great sword should be about 1,000 meters. In other words, the part that is inserted into the ground is about 300 meters long. Chu Mu thought to himself and analyzed. He had an intuition about swords. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that this was a special sword that was shorter or longer. Then, it could be less than 1,000 meters long or more. This was just a habit of Chu Mu. As a swordsman, he had dabbled in the art of swordsmithing. When he saw a sword, he would subconsciously analyze it. Let's go and sacrifice under the onyx great sword. Hurry up. If we're slow, we'll have to wait in line. The group immediately moved and rushed towards the onyx great sword at full speed. They were afraid that they would lose their chance if they were slow. After all, there were quite a lot of people here, but the spots for the sacrificial ceremony were limited. Therefore, those who came late would often have to wait in line. If there were some special circumstances, the queue might last for a long time. If it exceeded a month, they would miss the opportunity to leave. Chapter 17:12. The sword was pointed forward. The person holding the sword had a cold expression. He was highly focused as he suddenly let out a low roar. There seemed to be an invisible sound. A wave of energy was released from the sword. It was a faint silver color and traces of sharpness were emitted. Chu Mu happened to pass by not far away. He could tell that it was rank 1 sword force with a single glance. The person who released rank 1 sword force was a 4-star saint. It seemed like he had just obtained rank 1 sword force and was practicing it. To master it, he would need a lot of practice. As everyone knew, releasing sword force would consume one's energy faster. When Chu Mu grasped rank 1 sword force, his cultivation was still very low. He wasn't even in the nirvana realm. At that time, every time he released rank 1 sword force, he would feel a large amount of energy being consumed. He couldn't release it more than a few times, let alone for a long time. Now, these 4-star saints who only grasped rank 1 sword force could maintain the state of releasing rank 1 sword force all the time. The energy they consumed couldn't even keep up with their recovery speed. Not to mention rank 1 sword force, even rank 2 sword force and rank 3 sword force could be fully released for a 4-star saint. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for a 4-star saint to grasp rank 1 sword force. As long as one had some talent and worked hard, they would be able to grasp it in just a few months. The more powerful ones would only need a few days to grasp it. Chu Mu's sword force was grasped after he understood the essence of the sword art. In the land of exile, most people's sword force was grasped by sacrificing the dark god greatsword. Their grasp and understanding of the sword art wasn't deep enough. However, once they grasped sword force, their understanding of the sword art would gradually deepen. The speed at which they grasped the essence of the sword art would also increase. It was because of this that the land of exile was filled with sword cultivators. They were all sword saints and were much stronger than those in the deep blue world. Along the way, they went straight to the huge black sword that stood on the ground. Along the way, they saw many people practicing. Some were practicing the stimulation of sword force alone, and some were sparring with sword force to further deepen their grasp of sword force through actual combat. With the onyx god greatsword as the center, it could be said to be a huge square with a radius of 10,000 meters. It was very flat and there were no obstructions. The ground under his feet was black. After walking for about 6,000 meters, Chu Mu discovered that the color of the ground in front of him had changed. It was no longer black, but bronze. The black iron earth had turned into a bronze earth. With a stomp, Chu Mu could feel that this bronze earth was even harder than the black iron earth. There were also people practicing sword force here. However, they were not practicing first-level sword force. Instead, they were practicing second or even third-level sword force. Their cultivation was also relatively high. They were at least 5-star saint level. After advancing another 3,000 meters, the color of the ground changed again. It changed from bronze to silver. It was the silver earth. Black iron. Bronze. Silver. Chu Mu said to himself, "Is it going to be the land of gold next?" In the silver earth, there were obviously fewer people who practiced sword force. Even if there were, the sword force they practiced was not level 1, level 2, or level 3. It was at least level 4, and some were even level 5. That's level 5 sword force, right? It's so sharp. I wonder when I will be able to master level 5 sword force. Some people walking in front of Chu Mu exclaimed in a low voice. They were very envious. For many people, it was already very good to be able to master level 3 sword force. This was because hunting sinners was dangerous, and the danger was not low. Therefore, level 4 or even level 5 sword force was an extravagant hope for them. Level 1 to level 3 sword force were low-level sword force. Level 4 to level 6 sword force were mid-level sword force. Level 7 to level 9 sword force were high-level sword force. The 9 levels of sword force were divided into 3 ranks. This was also a kind of evaluation standard. Come. You only need 10 black iron hearts, and there will be an altar immediately. Once you are qualified to be sacrificed, you will be able to master the sword force that you have always dreamed of. If you can't even bear to part with 10 black iron hearts, then go and line up. Perhaps it will be your turn in a few days. After entering the Silver Land, Chu Mu and the others heard such cheers. Continuing forward, when they were 900 meters away from the onyx god huge sword, the color of the land changed again. It turned from silver to gold. It was the Golden Land. Walking into the Golden Land, Chu Mu immediately had a different feeling. This feeling was indescribable. Looking forward, Chu Mu realized that the closer they got to the onyx god huge sword, the purer and deeper the color of the land. In the end, the edge of the onyx god huge sword was almost black gold. In addition, Chu Mu also saw a protrusion on the Golden Land. It was in the shape of an altar. It was circular, about 10 meters in diameter, and 1 meter in height. The color of the altar was different from the Golden Land. It was dark gold. On the surface of the altar there were countless marks. The marks crisscrossed and looked very messy. They formed countless lines that contained mysteries. Chu Mu could vaguely feel that the lines on the altar and the onyx god huge sword seemed to have some connection. That's the altar for the sinner's heart. Chumu thought. There weren't many altars, only 12 in total. They surrounded the onyx god huge sword. Each altar was about 10 meters away from the onyx god huge sword. Seeing the onyx god huge sword from 10,000 meters away, the thousands of meters of illusory image gave people a strong shock. Now that they saw the onyx god huge sword at such a close distance, they couldn't see the thousands of meters of illusory image. However, the hundreds of meters of the onyx god huge sword brought an even stronger visual impact and shock. There were only 12 altars, but Chumu could see that there were at least thousands of people surrounding the onyx god huge sword. Thinking about it, just the lunar pavilion's flying shuttle that Chumu and company were on had 100 people. And in the entire city of Silver, the lunar pavilion wasn't the only one escorting them. There were several other factions, so there were hundreds of them. Furthermore, some factions with flying shuttles would head there alone. Although there weren't many people, there were still some. There were 5 cities, so it was normal for there to be 2,000 people. Furthermore, a portion of them had come before. They had temporarily stayed behind because they missed the opportunity to leave or for other reasons. There were at least 1,000 people, close to 2,000, who needed to use the altars to offer sacrifices to the onyx god huge sword and receive sword energy in return. However, there were only 12 altars. It was necessary to line up. At this moment, Chumu saw that there were many people lined up in front of 7 altars. Each line had at least 200 people waiting. The auras of these people weren't very strong. The weakest was a 4-star saint, while the strongest was a 6-star saint. Beside the other 5 altars there was a group of people. This group of people's cultivation was relatively high. They were all 7-star saints, and there were even 8-star saints. The person who shouted just now was a 7-star saint. At a glance, Chumu could tell that the 5 altars were probably occupied by that group of people. They relied on their powerful strength to occupy the altars. If one wanted to use the altars, they had to pay the heart of black iron as a fee. Of course, they wouldn't force them. If they weren't willing to pay, they could only line up at the other altars. There were 200 to 300 people lining up at each of the 7 altars. It would probably take 7 to 8 days, or even more than 10 days, for it to be their turn. For those who came here with limited time and were desperate to obtain sword energy, it was simply unbearable. What right do you have? The altars here weren't built by you. A voice that argued strongly for what was right immediately attracted the attention of many people. It was a 4-star saint who was shouting at the 7-star saints with a red face. What right do we have? Just because our fists are bigger than yours. A 7-star saint laughed mockingly. The resistance of a 4-star saint weakling was laughable in their eyes. It could also add some fun to their boring life here. Junior, give us 10 heart of black iron. Otherwise, you're sleepy. If you continue to make a fuss, I'll slash you with my sword, another 7-star saint said coldly. His ferocious look was terrifying. Can you not be like this every time? Boring. The 7-star saint who spoke first said helplessly. It was as if he had found something fun, but it was ruined. Faced with the threat of a 7-star saint, although the 4-star saint was incomparably annoyed and furious, he didn't dare to say anything. In the land of exile, if you wanted to kill, you could kill. There was no reason. If he said another word, he would definitely be slashed by the other party. For the sake of his own life, he had no choice but to retreat. No one would laugh at him. 10 heart of black iron? I'll pay. I want to use the altar immediately, someone said and took out 10 heart of black iron and handed it over. Very wise. A 7-star saint kept the heart of black iron and said with a smile, Go, you can use the altar now. Perhaps 10 heart of black iron was nothing compared to the 100 heart of black iron that came here by flying shuttle. However, it wasn't a small price either. Not everyone was willing to pay it. However, there were also people who weren't willing to wait. They would pay 10 heart of black iron and skip the queue. They could use the altar directly and make a sacrifice as soon as possible to obtain sword force. At this moment, an 8-star saint rank old man led a 3-star saint rank young man to one of the 5 occupied altars. 10 heart of black iron. The old man took out 10 heart of black iron and handed it over. So it's Senior Lon E. If you want to use the altar, you can use it anytime. The 7-star saint hurriedly smiled when he saw the old man. This old man was very powerful and came from a great force. He wasn't someone they could afford to offend. Well said. The old man chuckled. He had a lot of face. All of this was seen by everyone. However, there was nothing they could do. This was strength. The stronger one was, the more rules there were. Chapter 17:13. Chu Mu looked on coldly from the side, sweeping past the altars one by one. Get lost! A loud shout was heard. Someone was trying to snatch a spot on one of the 7 altars, but he was caught and thrown out. However, in the other line, there were also people who cut in line. In the end, no one dared to chase them away. The people in the front didn't care because they weren't obstructed. However, those who were pushed to the back didn't dare to make a sound because the other party's cultivation was higher than theirs. This was the reality, and this was the benefit of having strength. Without strength, it would be difficult to move around in a place like this. You're courting death. At another spot, someone was also trying to snatch a spot. However, his eyesight was not good, and he happened to snatch the spot of a fierce person, so he was kicked away. That person did not stop there. That person pulled out his sword, and with level 2 sword force, he slashed out. It was like thunder breaking through the sky, and the thunderous sword light tore through everything in front of him. Under the shocked eyes of the other party, it was like a peerless thunderbolt slashing through the world. Unable to block, he was struck by the sword and was sent flying. Blood splattered across the sky as he was sent flying hundreds of meters away. After landing on the ground, he struggled a few times. He was exhaling more than he was inhaling. He would not survive. Oh, there's blood again. A 7-star saint laughed mockingly. If you're not strong enough, then line up obediently. Otherwise, you can come to us. As long as you have 10 black iron hearts, you can use the altars immediately, and you don't have to wait in line. Think about it, the sooner you can master sword force, the sooner you'll be ahead of others. Indeed, there was such a saying in the world of cultivation. If you're 1 step ahead, you'll be 1 step ahead. If you're 1 step behind, you'll be 1 step behind. This was a very common situation. After seeing blood, it did not make people afraid. Instead, it aroused the fierceness of many people, and they relied on their strength to snatch a spot closer to the front. Snatching a spot had to be very careful. If you snatched the wrong spot, you'd lose face or even lose your life. However, not everyone had such good eyesight. There were always people who snatched the wrong spot, and the result was naturally a conflict. In the land of exile, killing people was not a big deal, let alone outside the camp. No one would care. Instead, it was treated as a good show by others. The premise was that it did not affect others. Otherwise, the consequences would be even worse. Not long after, several people were killed because of the conflict. Their blood splattered everywhere. After they were killed, their spatial rings naturally became the spoils of war for others. Chu Mu retracted his gaze. Actually, with his strength, he could easily snatch the first spot on any of the 7 altars. After all, the most powerful person in the queue was only a peak 6-star saint. Even if it was a peak 7-star saint, Chu Mu still had the ability to snatch it. However, he didn't plan to do so. Being too ostentatious and eye-catching was not the original intention of Chu Mu. Chu Mu took out 10 black iron cores and handed them to a 7-star saint. Not bad. You are also very wise. Wait a moment. After he finishes his sacrifice, it will be your turn. After receiving the heart of black iron, the 7-star martial sage smiled at Chu Mu. His attitude was still acceptable. Chu Mu nodded and stared at the person on the altar. This person had been standing at the center of the altar. He had taken out 100 black steel hearts and placed them around the altar in order. After placing them down, the scattered black steel hearts seemed to be moved by an invisible force, and became disorderly and orderly. Following that, the secret runes on the altar activated and emitted traces of light, piercing through the 100 black iron cores and wrapping them up. Chumu was shocked. He knew how hard the black iron cores were, but they were pierced so easily. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the power of the light on the altar was. After the 100 black iron cores were wrapped up, they seemed to be melting. After an hour, the 100 black iron cores seemed to have completely melted. They turned into black streams of light and flew into the sky, rapidly flying towards the black god great sword. In the blink of an eye, the 100 black iron cores turned into black lights and shot towards the black god great sword. They instantly entered the great sword and disappeared. The black god great sword seemed to tremble, but it was very subtle and hard to detect. After that, it became silent and there was no more movement. However, the person standing on the altar raised his head and looked at the black god great sword. He quietly waited. He had already sacrificed once. This was the second time, so he knew the process of the sacrifice. After about an hour, the black god great sword seemed to tremble again. A faint silver light shot out from the black god great sword in an instant. It was as straight as an unsheathed sword and shot down. Its target was the person standing on the altar. The faint silver sword light made people feel its terrifying sharpness from afar. It was as if it could pierce through the void. No one doubted its power. However, the person didn't have any intention of dodging. Instead, his eyes revealed joy and excitement. A faint silver sword light shot out and pierced through the man's forehead before sinking into his body. The man's body trembled uncontrollably and his eyes seemed to be surrounded by a faint silver light. Traces of sharp aura rose from this person's body, gradually becoming stronger and stronger. Chumu had been observing. He was sure that he didn't miss any details. However, he didn't gain anything. From the moment he saw the black god great sword, Chumu's main focus was on it. He carefully observed it, but he didn't see anything special about it. This could only mean that the black god great sword exceeded Chumu's level by too much. However, this was also because the time he had to observe it was too short. If he had enough time, he might be able to see something. Besides observing, Chumu also planned to personally experience the feeling of receiving a reward from the sacrifice. Perhaps it would be more direct. About an hour later, the sharp aura on that person's body was withdrawn. His eyes, which had been closed for an unknown period of time, opened once again. His eyes were filled with excitement. He quickly pulled out his sword and stabbed it out. Under the concentrated strength, a faint silver light flashed from the sword. However, it was extinguished in an instant. That was second-grade sword force. Although it was only for a moment, it was because the person wasn't familiar with it yet. Haha, I finally have second-grade sword force. The person laughed and jumped off the altar. He quickly went to the side to practice second-grade sword force. He wanted to master it as soon as possible. Mastering second-grade sword force was naturally more difficult than first-grade sword force. However, with first-grade sword force as a foundation, it wouldn't be too difficult. Alright, it's your turn now. Towards this phenomenon, those 7-star saints had seen it countless times, so they casually spoke to Chumu. Chumu nodded. He jumped and landed on the altar. He didn't rush to take out the heart of black iron. Instead, he first observed the various patterns on the altar. The crisscrossing patterns seemed chaotic, but they actually contained mysteries. Chumu only felt that the more he looked, the more mysterious they became. Their mysteries were endless, yet he was unable to comprehend anything. This feeling was very strange and a bit awkward. After looking for about 15 minutes, Chumu couldn't understand anything. He gave up temporarily. Even with his powerful memory, he couldn't remember these patterns. They were too complicated. He took out 10 heart of black iron. It's actually a rookie. The 7-star saints nearby laughed when they saw this. The rookie here was someone who hadn't mastered sword force yet. Not long after, the 10 heart of black iron were enveloped by the altar's light. They melted and turned into a ray of black iron light that shot towards the dark deity great sword. After a while, the faint silver light left the dark deity great sword and shot towards Chu Mu. In Chu Mu's eyes, the faint silver light was like a peerless expert stabbing at him. It gave him a feeling that he couldn't dodge it. Of course, if Chu Mu wanted to, he could also dodge it. However, he didn't. In an instant, the faint silver light shot into Chu Mu's forehead. Chu Mu carefully felt the feeling of the sword force entering his body. It quickly circled around his body, and was about to enter his body. However, it suddenly came into contact with the sword force that he already had. Chu Mu's sword force had reached the peak of level 9. However, the sword force that entered was only level 1. The difference between the two was immeasurable. The moment the sword force entered, it retreated. Finally, it left Chu Mu's forehead and returned to the dark deity great sword. What's going on? Those who saw it all revealed astonished expressions one after another. Generally speaking, after the sword force entered the body, it would settle down in the person's body and gradually allow the person to master it. It was extremely rare for the sword force to leave after entering the body. It seems that this person has already mastered level 1 sword force. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this. Someone immediately said. It was an 8-star saint. He had seen a record of this before and thought of a similar situation. Maybe this person isn't suitable for sword force. Someone else said. After all, there were always exceptions. It was normal for some people not to be suitable for sword force. These kinds of cultivators had very low status in the land of exile. Chu Mu faintly creased his brows. He didn't really understand this situation, but after the sword energy entered his body and circled around it, it gave him an indescribable feeling. It was very, very faint. Soon after, Chu Mu took out another 100 black iron hearts and put them down. He planned on trying again. After a period of time, the 100 black iron hearts were also melted, transforming into a black ray of light that soared into the sky and entered the black god enormous sword. Following that, a faint silver ray of light, the second-rank sword energy, shot into the center of Chu Mu's eyebrows. After rapidly circling once, it left Chu Mu's forehead and returned to the black god enormous sword just like the first time. At this moment, the indescribable feeling was even clearer. Then, Chu Mu took out another 1,000 black iron hearts and placed them down. This guy is actually so rich. When the 7-star saints and the others saw this, they were shocked. A low-level 4-star saint was definitely at the bottom of the food chain in the land of exile. Yet, he was able to take out more than 1,000 black iron cores. This kind of wealth was much greater than other 4-star saints. Chapter 17:14. There were only 12 dark gold altars under the obsidian giant sword. 5 of them were occupied by some powerful people. If one wanted to use them, one had to pay 10 black iron hearts as a fee. The other 7 were public. There was no additional fee, but one had to wait in line. No matter how powerful a force was, they wouldn't dare to occupy all 12 altars. That would incur the wrath of the public. If they left 7 altars, more than half of them would be left behind. Those powerful forces wouldn't deliberately provoke them. Only in this way could they live in peace. Every time a sacrifice was made, it would take about 3 hours from the moment the sinner's heart was placed down to the moment the sword force returned. According to the calculation of one sacrifice every 3 hours, there were only 8 chances to make a sacrifice in 24 hours a day. Looking at those waiting in line, there were at least 200 altars. According to the calculation of 8 altars a day, it would take at least 20 days to finish. Not everyone was willing to wait for more than 20 days in one go. Chu Mu naturally didn't want to wait that long. Of course, he didn't want to expose his strength and attract the attention of others. Therefore, he chose to pay 10 black iron hearts as a fee to use the dark gold altars immediately. But now those 7-star saints were a little dissatisfied. Chu Mu had already made 3 sacrifices, which was 4 hours and a half. This was equivalent to 3 people using the altars, but Chu Mu only paid 10 black iron hearts. But for a moment, they didn't say anything, because there weren't such rules before. No one had made 2 or even 3 sacrifices in a row. Usually, after making a sacrifice, one would obtain sword force and familiarize themselves with it for a period of time before making a second sacrifice. Could it be that this person has mastered level 3 sword force? Impossible. He's only a beginner 4-star saint. Indeed, how could a beginner 4-star saint be able to master level 3 sword force? Only those peerless geniuses with unparalleled talent in swordsmanship could achieve that. Could this person in front of them be a peerless genius in swordsmanship? That's impossible. If he was, why would he come here in such a shabby group shuttle? Then they saw Chu Mu take out another sinner's heart. This time, it was shining with a bronze light. Bronze heart. The people who saw it couldn't help but tremble. Their eyes shone with an intense light, extremely shocked. It was already shocking enough that a 4-star martial saint could take out more than 1,000 black iron hearts. Now, he actually took out 10 bronze hearts. One had to know that a single bronze heart could be exchanged for 10,000 black iron hearts. 10 bronze hearts were equivalent to 100,000 black iron hearts. Compared to 10 bronze hearts, the 1,000 black iron hearts that Chu Mu had taken out before were nothing. This guy is actually so rich. Judging from his calm expression after taking out 10 bronze hearts, I'm guessing there are more than 10 of them. He's only a 4-star martial saint, but he actually possesses such shocking wealth. He's really a fat sheep. Among the crowd, 2 people were secretly discussing. They stared at Chu Mu with eyes full of greed and savagery. Unknowingly, Chu Mu had become the center of attention. Although he didn't want to be in the limelight, he had unknowingly become the center of attention. The 10 bronze hearts were also melted by the power of the altar. They turned into a bronze light and shot into the onyx god huge sword. Not long after, a silver sword light shot out from the onyx god huge sword and shot towards Chu Mu. It was as if it wanted to pierce through Chu Mu. In an instant it disappeared between Chu Mu's eyebrows. This sword light was a 4th-level sword force. After it circled around Chu Mu's body and came into contact with Chu Mu's 9th-level sword force, it left between Chu Mu's eyebrows and returned to the onyx god huge sword. The inexplicable feeling in Chu Mu's heart deepened. The sword force left again? Could this kid have mastered a 4th-level sword force? Are you kidding me? How could he have mastered a 4th-level sword force? He must have a physique that can't activate sword force. How sad. He wasted so many sinners' hearts. Many people looked at Chu Mu with pity and regret. 10 bronze hearts and more than 1,000 black iron hearts. Such a great fortune had been wasted just like that. The onyx god huge sword wouldn't return to you just because you couldn't obtain sword force. Then, their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. They saw that the 4-star beginner-level martial saint actually took out another bronze heart. This time, there were a total of 100 bronze hearts. 100 bronze hearts. To many mid-level martial saints, it was a fortune that they could only dream of. To many 7-star and 8-star martial saints, it was still a great fortune. It was enough to tempt them. Even the 7-star martial saints who had occupied the altar revealed a greedy look in their eyes. Although they had occupied the altar and set the rules, it didn't mean that they had to follow the rules to a certain extent. When the benefits were great enough, it wasn't strange that even blood brothers would turn against each other. At this moment, the strength that Chu Mu had displayed was not proportional to the wealth that he had displayed. One must know that the more wealth one had, the more powerful one had to be to protect it. Otherwise, one would be a fat sheep in the eyes of others. Obviously, Chu Mu was a fat sheep in many people's eyes. The fat kind. Chu Mu didn't care about it. Or rather, he didn't notice that his mind was completely attracted by the onyx god huge sword. He couldn't tolerate anything else. Standing on the altar, he was protected by the altar's power. External forces, even the full force attack of a 9-star martial saint, wouldn't be able to shake it. Now, Chu Mu was very safe. The 100 bronze hearts were also pierced through by the power of the altar. They were wrapped up and turned into pure energy. Then, they condensed into a ray of bronze light that soared into the sky and shot into the Black God Greatsword, entering the Black God Greatsword. The Onyx God huge sword trembled. Compared to the previous tremors, the tremors were clearer and stronger. Then, a silver sword light shot out from the Onyx God huge sword. It was purer than the previous sword light. This was the level 5 sword energy. This sword light was like an invisible peerless sword cultivator that was attacking Chu Mu. The sword pierced straight at him without any changes or superfluous technique. It was just a simple stab. However, this stab gave Chu Mu a feeling that it had returned to its original state and its sharpness was restrained. This sword was close to the level of Chu Mu's swordsmanship. He could still dodge it, but he didn't need to. The level 5 sword energy once again penetrated between Chu Mu's eyebrows and entered his body. It quickly circled around his body and came into contact with Chu Mu's level 9 sword energy again. There was a huge gap between the level 5 sword energy and the level 9 sword energy. Therefore, the level 5 sword energy left Chu Mu's eyebrows once again. The inexplicable feeling that Chu Mu had was further strengthened. I see. Vaguely, Chu Mu seemed to have grasped something. He carefully thought about it and recalled the feeling left behind by the level 5 sword energy when it entered his body from the level 1 sword energy to the level 5 sword energy. That feeling was actually the same. It could be said that it came from the same origin. It went from shallow to deep and gradually strengthened. If I could sacrifice 1,000 bronze hearts, that feeling would be clearer. If I could sacrifice silver hearts, I'm afraid that I would be able to completely understand that feeling and what it was hinting at. It wouldn't be like now where I can only make some guesses based on that feeling, Chu Mu thought to himself. Unfortunately, although he still had bronze hearts, he didn't have 1,000 of them. He only had slightly more than 100. Although it was a good fortune, it wasn't enough for him to sacrifice a 6th time. This time, the sacrifice had to stop here. How stupid. He actually sacrificed more than 100 bronze hearts and 1,000 black iron hearts 5 times. How much wealth is that? If it was given to me, it would be enough for me to master level 5 sword energy. It's important to know one's own limitations. He knew that he couldn't master sword energy, but he insisted on being brave. He wasted so much wealth for nothing. These people gritted their teeth as they spoke. It was as if they wished that those bronze hearts and black iron hearts were theirs. They were also reprimanding Chu Mu for his stupidity. In their opinion, Chu Mu's 5 sacrifices were not only useless, but also wasted a lot of wealth for nothing. It was simply extremely stupid. However, they didn't understand that although Chu Mu seemed to have wasted 5 chances and a lot of wealth, he actually gained something. To his gains, these losses were nothing. They were just external forces. That feeling is telling me that as long as I sacrifice the black iron, bronze, and silver sinner's hearts once, it can guide me to a breakthrough in sword energy. Chu Mu thought to himself. This was the conclusion he came to after recalling and comprehending. He was vaguely certain, but whether it was true or not, he still needed to verify it. To verify it, he naturally had to pay a price. However, Chu Mu didn't have enough bronze hearts and didn't even have a single silver heart. He couldn't do it in a short period of time. It seemed that he could only collect more sinners' hearts. Only when he had 1,000 bronze hearts and 1,110 silver hearts would he come back to the dark deity Great Sword to sacrifice. After the sacrifice, Chu Mu would definitely have an unexpected gain. Other than that, he couldn't see any other mysteries of the dark deity Great Sword for the time being. Chu Mu had no choice but to walk down from the altar. As soon as he walked down, he was surrounded by a few 7-star saints. Junior, you alone have sacrificed 5 times, which is equivalent to 5 people sacrificing. 10 black iron hearts are obviously not enough. A 7-star saint said. Chu Mu didn't want to argue with them. He directly took out 40 black iron hearts and gave it to them. Seeing Chu Mu take out 40 black iron hearts, the pupils of these 7-star saints instantly shrank. In the distance, 2 people with fiendish expressions walked over. Their eyes were fixed on Chu Mu. The greed in their eyes was very clear, as if they wanted to eat Chu Mu.